We have apologies for lateness from this section from Councillor Hollis. He's going to be Skyping in shortly, or when he gets technologically able. Our first submitter this morning is Joe Wills. Good morning, Joe. How are you? I hope you had a healthy breakfast this morning. Okay, well, it's healthier than mine. That's good. So, Joe, you know the procedure very well. 10 minutes, and if you finish a little earlier, we may have some questions for you. And Joe's submission is on page 815 of your agenda. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you. I've actually made two submissions on the understanding that I could speak to both, so that's what I'm intending to do. I wouldn't have expected you to have read my second submission because I only put it in on Wednesday. So I'm assuming the submission you're referring to now is my first one. I'm not sure what page numbers you're looking at.
We've got the second submission as well loaded.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Cool. So what I'm intending to do is come back early next week and speak to my second submission. To be honest, for the first submission, to the first annual plan that came out during COVID or pre-COVID, I was just incredibly disappointed and have I've made my submission and have been trying to think how to speak to it, just based around that disappointment of what really felt to me like a forced singular narrative of growth. And what I mean by that is that the annual plan was written in a way that told us as citizens that growth is our only option and growth exists on its own as its own entity and we can't control it. I mean, and this makes no sense. This isn't true. Growth is man-made and we continually feed it. So there was a lot of disappointment in that. I was, as you pointed out, I've made quite a few submissions and been involved in quite a few different programs and different projects around spatial planning and smart growth and UFD, and we're still saying the same things. So my initial submission was pretty short, based on the knowledge that I knew I'd have a chance to make a second one. But the key points from the first one was that we seem to be told that all we can do is grow and sprawl. There was a comment in the first annual plan that increased congestion is a result of growth. Now, increased congestion is a result of poor design. So, yeah, I am kind of disappointed and to a point of not really knowing what to say. The other question I have is, who is growth good for? So this document talked about, the annual plan talked a lot about, these new communities that will be developed. Who will they serve? Because the way that we have built our communities to date is for those who can afford to live there. So there was also talk about the land and housing shortage making homes expensive. Again, this is man-made. These are systems that we are allowing to continue through the house and land packages that this whole city is wrapped up in. It's not that the cost of land, the cost of housing doesn't just magically appear, it's created. So who is this growth supporting? One comment I made in my second submission, but is relevant to this one, is we seem to be building our communities and planning our communities for the people that can afford to live there, and there is no consideration for those who can't. So we're creating wealthy neighbourhoods, and the worst case scenario is slums for those that can't. For the people in the margins, where do they go? How do they live? How do they get around? They don't have the same choice as people with money who the new communities are being built for. So everything that we're talking about, everything that was forced in this initial annual plan, felt like it was a man-made system. We're creating the system that is broken, and we're continually creating the same system over and over again. I think I mentioned the congestion being by design. It's not a result of growth, it's a result of the growth that we are delivering. There was a comment in the first annual plan, and I think in the second one, that if we do not plan well, we'll end up with fragmented suburbs and even more pressure on roads, water supply, wastewater systems, and community amenities. And the whole concept of planning well means we don't actually plan for sprawl. So there was a lot of confusion. So my understanding is that Te Tumu and Tauriko West are not in consideration. They are signed off. They're going ahead regardless. The annual plan didn't speak like that, but to my understanding, I could be wrong, that is a given. This sprawl will be happening. And there is very little consideration to how these suburbs or these new areas, these new developments are going to be connected to the rest of the city. So connectivity and inclusivity should be, by default, built into our city growth. So I'm not denying that the city needs to support more housing. I understand that. I've been in enough forums and groups to understand that. But the way we do things has just been wrong over and over and over again, and the initial annual plan just kept singing the same songs, and I felt really offended by it, because it was speaking as if it was a foregone conclusion and don't worry, council knows best. And from what I've seen, that's not the case. There's a lot of really good evidence out there to demonstrate how we could be doing things differently, which is through better transport systems, improved housing performance. We keep building really poor houses, and that is something I can talk to in the second submission. Access by proximity is something that seems to be missed. Community connectedness, and a strategic approach to low impact design. To urban wilding, to nature connection. One thing that we learned through COVID, through the lockdown, is that people gravitated towards nature. They didn't miss shopping centres. They went to the beach, they went to the parks, they went to spaces where they could connect with nature. This is a vital part of well-being in a city that actually looks after its people. So I'll finish off just by saying that I thought the initial annual plan seemed to lack any awareness or insight into any of the work that any of the groups, through smart growth, through community consultation, through UFD, have been saying. That there is another way, and we're just not listening to it. And finally, one thing I'll say in this submission, which is in the initial one, is that there seems to be a lot of funding going to economic development agencies, and there's very little or none going to agencies that can actually support the council with sustainable development. So I would just like to say that I would like to see a redirection of funding from economic development agencies into organisations like Sustainable Business Network and others that can support the council to understand sustainable development and just take the foot off the pedal of economic growth for the sake of economic growth, time after time. So I'll leave it there. And we'll look forward to speaking to my next submission next week.
Thank you, Jo. That was really thought-provoking. Appreciate the submission. Question, we've got one from Councillor Robson, and then Mayor Powell.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. Jo, you raised the issue of people in the first draft AP, the beyond our control situation that was narrative being used. What do you say to those people that say this is a demand from central government, that central government says we have to go out as well as up, we have to do this, we have to have 10 years plus 20% of shovel-ready land available for developers, development, Freudian slip. What do you say to people who run that narrative that we don't have a choice because central government, the only way central government will give us money is we have to do what they say? And of course central government sets the rules around tax and capital gains and property and immigration, and what do you say to those people?
I say we do have a choice, and we have a choice to do it better. Sure, go build up if that's what the government's giving. Out if that's what the government's funding. But that doesn't mean you have to build out in the way that we are continually doing it, which is still disconnected. So there is a different way that we can achieve the same goals, but we are still focused on the only way you're going to move around the city is by a car. The only way you're going to be able to afford a home in the city is if you are on a double income of probably over $200,000 a year, and that our communities are for the wealthy. Our new build community developments are for people with money. So we could do it differently.
Final question from Mayor Powell.
Chair. Joe, very compelling indeed. I'm left with a feeling that we aren't telling our stories very, very well at all. You've looked at the smart growth UFTI work in detail, I'm sure. Are you left therefore with an opinion that we haven't, or that the work hasn't been informed by all that you're talking about, which is to say multimodal transport options, connected suburbs, for want of a better term, so hubs, and that the developments that are being proposed, and you specifically mentioned Tiriko West and Tumu, won't have a level of connectivity in the future that I totally agree with you is lacking now, and is lacked because of lack of foresight, and is not there because of lack of foresight. I've got no argument with that at all. But are you not seeing that coming through the UFTI/smart growth designs?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Joan. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Colleagues, our next submitter is Brian Norton, and Brian's submission is on page 222 of your agenda. Brian, we've got 10 minutes allocated to you, which you may use as you see fit, but if you do finish a little earlier, my colleagues may have some questions for you. And to one of those colleagues, I think Councillor Hollis, are you listening in? Is he listening in? Has he disappeared? Okay, Councillor Hollis, I've got my phone set up here, and if you have a question, just in terms of order, if you wouldn't mind texting me, and it will show up on my screen, and then I'll know that you are requesting a question. Thank you. Over to you, Brian. There's the talk button, the purple one there, right in front of you. There you go. Brilliant.
Thank you. Good morning. I trust the format in which I presented this, because I've amended the first one with the opportunity to address the changes to the plan. So I trust that format was able to be followed by councillors. I've been in this chamber a few times in the past. Some councillors here will recognise me. I just want to cut through very quickly some of the items I've raised here. Just listening to the previous speaker, I think some of the issues I would like to talk along those lines are really issues for the long-term plan, and so I will be looking to make some submission for the long-term plan because I think that's where some of these sorts of issues need to be addressed. Just last night I read half of the UPTI report, and I'm thinking, there's some good stuff there, but some tweaking I think should happen. So just quickly, if I can just bullet point a few things. How can a lot of the things that you folk over the next 12 months, because that's what we're talking about, the annual plan, decisions you can make, decisions you can't make, they're already made. What's already in, for instance, roading contracts, reserve maintenance contracts, and so on and so forth. You can't change what's in the contract. But there are variables within the allocations that staff have where I think there's probably scope for small changes to happen. And you look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. So those small changes collectively can make a difference. I've mentioned at one point in my submission there how there's a number of small things like, do we really need to be doing cleaning up of seaweed on the beaches? If we're looking to, deal with the issues that COVID has thrown at us, do we need to be looking at as much beach grooming as we've been doing? I sort of have an aversion to nearly $500,000 going up in fireworks and related activities. And I think, yes, that's been recognised and it's been cut back a little bit, but only a little bit when I look at how much is being spent or being budgeted for Christmas Eve. And I think, really, guys? Are you taking this seriously? Just this morning I read that the government's put $10 million out there for event sector funding, and applications are open as of today. And that's for this sort of thing. And I would like to respectfully suggest that this council makes an application for that if we can cut back some of our event spender funding over the Christmas New Year period. So I'm suggesting looking at small ways, and I could spend ages talking about from my experience, and I have a length of experience in local government, small ways in which staff can cut back on things. And I know some cutbacks have been made. I believe there's opportunities for more. If anyone wants to talk to me later, I can suggest some more, but I'm going to run out of time. If I flick forward to determine profits for cycleway routes, I support that in general. I want to make a few comments there about cycleway planning. Unless cyclists are not only safe, but are perceived by the average cyclist to be safe, then the cycleways that are being made are going to be underutilised. And so that's a waste of council expenditure. If we're building cycleways that cyclists are not going to use because they perceive them not to be safe. And green lines within the fog line of the road not only takes away the margin of error for motorists, but it doesn't mean it's safe for cyclists, and cyclists believe that. Therefore, they're not using them. And we're wasting money painting green lines down road and repainting over the green lines if people are not using them. We need to start doing it more sensibly. Now, on the back page of my submission, I included this example here, and I could have spent a lot more time, and it was just one example on a piece on Cameron Road showing how when you come to an intersection, you pull the limit line back on the side road, and you have room for your cycleway connections and so on. There's ideas in there that I believe can be adopted on a lot of the arterial routes around the city to make foot traffic and cycle traffic far more sensible. And in this detail here, you see how it's also pulled back the bus stop and removed roadside car parking. If we remove roadside car parking, then people can't park outside the local whatever. They have to use the bus or their cycle or whatever. One concern that I have and have had for a long time is the morning rush hour and how that's exacerbated by schools. Get rid of parking on the public roads outside schools. Stop mums and dads picking up their kids and dropping them off every day and have them use the bus. We all know that when the holidays come around, suddenly the roads, I can get to work on time, and so on and so forth. My work takes me throughout the entire Western Bay of Plenty on a weekly basis. So I'm not, and yes, I'm a single occupant driver, but last week I was down the eastern end of the district and up the western end of the district, of the Western Bay district. And I'm moving around all the time. There's a lot of service providers who have to get across the city and get out into the rest of the, Western Bay. And I feel, look, workers like myself and others are being tarred with the same brush. Get on the bus. I've actually got to travel 4.5 kilometres to get to a bus. And then to get into the town is going to take me another 3/4 of an hour, or to get to other places, and then bus interchange. It doesn't work for a lot of people. But for those who it does work, yes, encourage them onto the buses and other modal transport systems. And to that end, I'd like to also quickly say, for about the last 12.5 years, been working as a consultant and contractor to Western Bay District Council full time, and I have full access to the Western Bay District Council computer network, so I've known what a number of people suddenly found out in recent months through COVID, how much work you can get done working from home, and how much more cost effective it is for the organisation, for this organisation, for others. And there are, I had a council staff member come to my home the other day and thought, man, if I was here, I'd have so much less interruption, I'd get so much more work done. And I'm thinking, councillors, can you perhaps look to extend that to your staff? And there's an opportunity to save funds there going forward, have more of them working from home and having Zoom meetings or whatever. And yes, I know they'll have to come in here from time to time, and as I've said in my submission here, there are cost savings to council by doing that. So moving on. I'm concerned that the annual uniform charge, the change that's being proposed there, is a move away from the user pay system and is putting more costs on those who are perceived to be wealthy, simply because you've got a bigger property, a more valuable property. You could be asset rich but cash poor. And with COVID, there is a lot of people now moving into that domain. They've lost their job, or there's significant cost losses, income losses. But this model here seems to, we're going to suddenly increase the annual the uniform annual general charge by reducing the other charge. So it's a Robin Hood approach. But I believe it runs ahead of the annual plan at the rate that is being proposed in this. It runs ahead of the 10-year plan at the rate that's being proposed in this current financial round, this annual plan. When I looked at the annual plan, pages 274 to 290 of the annual plan, I'm thinking, hey guys, you're suddenly accelerating this a lot faster than we were led to believe when the annual plan when the long-term plan was put out for submissions and so on. So I would like to suggest that there's a fallback there to how it was before. I'm not saying it changes the overall rate, it's just there's a fairness issue that I think that has been overlooked. Just finally on that, I make donations to St. John's, to Coast Guard, to the Blind, Foundation for the Blind and so on. I know my time's up, but by hitting those who can afford to make discretionary donations like that, so suddenly I've got to stop making donations to them. There's an adverse effect, and we know right now St. John's is $30 million in debt. I've run out of time. I'd like to talk some more, but thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Brian, and thank you for your submission, which is well thought out, and I do appreciate a good map with a good legend too in it. So well done, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll be deliberating over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be looking to making some decisions before the end of the month. But obviously look forward to hearing from you in the LTP by the sounds of things.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next submitter, another man who needs no introduction in this chamber. Glenn, g'day, how you going?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Chair, and Mayor and Councillors, thanks for providing this opportunity. Just to be clear, I'm presenting, as I think you know, on behalf of the Sustainable Business Network today. I'll be coming back on Monday. I've just arranged to come back on a personal capacity where I'll be hitting up my ward, where's Larry there? Ward councillors around bus shelters. But I would say Sustainable Business Network also is very supportive of fast-tracking bus shelters in the city. And I see you have done some, but I'll come back on Monday and hit you up about some more. Today, I guess, it's speaking on behalf of the network around a few key issues that fit quite nicely with the revised annual plan. I will thank Raj for clarifying with me about the submission process, but I've got to say there's probably a lot of confusion amongst some of the submitters around whether there need to be 2 oral submissions or 1, and you heard from Jo what she had found out, so I think it'd be nice to give some flexibility to submitters on that. So this is an integrated submission. I know it's a bit long with 5 pages, but I know Marty likes a good read over the weekend, so so I guess I'll just sort of hit the key points as I see them. And the initial submission I did was really saying that the case for sustainability had never been stronger in this city, in this country, in the world. So I think there'd been a bit of a split in media reports back in April or whenever, with some people saying now was the time to go hard on economy, jobs, and haven't got enough money to be able to put into sustainability. But I think that's just a misunderstanding of what sustainability is all about. And I know my CEO was involved with Auckland Council. There was quite a big discussion up there, and they did take a bit of an axe to some of their sustainability funding. But I think if you define sustainability in the broader sense around economic, social, environmental, cultural, full well-beings basically, then I think this is a time to really focus on all those issues, and you can't sort of have one thing at the expense of others. So the sort of knee-jerk reaction that I've heard at times has been, about we need to just focus on jobs and money and stuff, but that's just going to lead to problems down the track. So I think we need a really big reassessment around the country of what we want to do and the way we want to do it. So in Tauranga, I think the idea of a sustainability framework has been something that a lot of us have talked about for years. I understand there has been work done by staff on that, so I'd strongly suggest that gets picked up. I'd also strongly urge you to pick up the draft environment strategy. I have a little critique in my submission about the approach that was taken with not just by your council but by all the partners in UFTI to engagement. Well, I think that was most definitely not a co-design process. I can assure you of that. Speaking as a stakeholder who was trying to make it slightly co-design-like, and that was firmly rejected. But I can say that the environment strategy was a good piece of co-design work that your council's done. And there have been other pieces of work that your council has done that have been really good quality engagement with communities. And the shame is when some of that stuff it just gets lost. So we don't know what the draft environment strategy looks like because we can't see it. We don't know what the draft sustainability framework looks like because we can't see it. But it would be really nice to actually at some point have that work picked up and integrated into a broader piece. And I think the biggest piece that's missing is the economic sustainability. That my understanding of where that economic policy sits is that it's a pretty much an outdated economic development strategy, I think it might be. And I think the time is right to actually reassess what you want to get out of economic development in the city, how you want to do it, and really sort of listen to what people are saying in the city as opposed to what I know was presented around the Bay of Connections work as pretty much just leave it to the economic development agencies to do their stuff. And I think this is not at all casting any aspersions on Priority 1. Like, they do what they are tasked to do, and they probably do it very well. But my concern is that it should be the people of the city who determine what the economic development policy is. And that means commercial ratepayers, it means residential ratepayers, it means people who are renting, whatever. It means everybody should have a say in the stake of, in the way that this city develops. And economic development policy should, I think, mesh in with all the social outcomes you're looking for and the environmental outcomes. And that's certainly something that, as a sustainable business network, when we work with other councils, we see that's happening elsewhere to a far greater degree than in Tauranga and the Western Bay of Plenty. So, if there's one thing that I could pick specifically in terms of opportunities, we did a piece of work, can't remember, I think it was last year, in Auckland, where we got some funding as a network from ATI, the Economic Development Agency there, and looked at the opportunity for Auckland City with a circular economy. And that, includes reducing waste and redesigning some systems there, including, we looked at 3 sectors. Transport was included, and construction. And the opportunity was for $8.8 billion a year economic benefit to Auckland based on changes that could be made to make those 3 sectors more sustainable. So that was a figure that came up if it was phased in up until 2030. There were significant reductions in CO2 emissions, but it shows that you can have much improved sustainability without sacrificing economic benefits. And in fact, to get, when you see what some of the big investors around the world are now doing, they are focusing specifically on opportunities for investment that are based on sustainability, on circular economy, low carbon. Those are the big opportunities. So I think we need to have that front and centre of our economic development policy here. And in particular, just the community outcomes, making sure that our economic development policy is delivering the outcomes that our communities want, not just what a certain group of people in the city might happen to want at any point in time. I'll touch just briefly on the finances. I think you've got the rates side of it much better balanced than I have seen in recent times, and I think particularly I've put a bit more detail in the submission around the differential. I strongly support the changes there. I realise it's going to be really tricky for you at the moment with, a lot of businesses will be under financial pressure, but I think when I look at the way it's, your preferred option, I think that's about right, and I think the pressure will be on the LTP, presumably, to figure out how much money you're going to need for CapEx there and how you're going to resolve some of those issues. But certainly I think the argument that I put in here is that I can't see any reason myself why you can't have a differential of 1.6 or more, because the 1.6, I think your staff's figures were, and you do the maths yourself and you figure that that's pretty much the same as a residential ratepayer paying a 1-to-1 ratio. So to me it just makes it back to a level playing field. So that's a really key issue, I think, in the long term. Community engagement, I think, if you've read my submission, you know what I think in terms of UFD, but the more important point that I put there is, that was a collaborative process with a lot of partners, but I'd say all eyes are on TCC for the TSP and for some of the other pieces of work that you're going to have. So we really want to encourage good engagement with your communities and would love to support that.
2 questions, one from Mayor Powell, then secondly, Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chair. Glenn, as always, insightful and interesting. If we're the worst, who's best practice by way of council?
I didn't say you're the worst.
Well, that's what I heard. So if we're who's best?
In terms of which part?
The first bit, the cycle, the engagement, the inclusion of environmental, the circular economy.
Well, I think you can look at the model that, and I'm not saying this is the best, because I would say there's a mixture all around the country of pros and cons, but Rotorua is an interesting one where they have a more integrated process between what their council's goals are and what their economic development agency's goals are, and they have, for instance, picked up the circular economy. They're focusing on a new low carbon strategy, but they have done a huge piece of work with their communities, co-design of a sustainability strategy, and that was the first thing they did. Then they moved into trying to realign their economic development priorities. So I would say you can just look there and say, well, there will be a few tips you can pick up. Yep.
Councillor Baldock.
I'm happy to wait, Mr Chair, till he returns. Likewise with Joe, I'll have some questions then, so it's nice they'll be back.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldock. And thank you, Glenn.
Yep,
we'll see you next week. Nigel Tutt, representing Priority 1. Come on in. It's turning into a bit of a who's who of Tauranga this morning, I have to say, looking at the public gallery. Page 571 of your agenda. And Glenn as well, welcome back to the chamber. Glenn. Greg. See, almost. There you go. G'day, Greg. Welcome back to the chamber. Page 571, colleagues. And over to you, Nigel and Greg.
Morena koutou. So look, I'm glad we've got this slot. And I guess I'd like to start by addressing the previous speaker. I think perhaps if he took the time to come and yarn to us, he might understand a little bit more about what that economic development strategy is. And I would also like to point out that intelligent, sustainable economic development is not only the domain of the Sustainable Business Network. So, can I have a chat? Oh, is that away? So what you got there, but look, intelligent and sustainable economic development is not only the domain of the Sustainable Business Network. Of course, that's what we want. It's not economic well-being at the expense of anything else. And I guess that's what I'd like to start with. Look, our commitment is to the sustainable prosperity of this region, and we value the partnership with TCC on that. And I guess strong economic well-being supports social, cultural and environmental well-being as well. So right now, of course, in difficult economic times, the nature sways a little bit towards retaining the quantity of jobs in the region, which is entirely appropriate. But pretty quickly, I think that will move back to the quality of jobs and the ability for economic well-being to influence the good of the community, which is, of course, what we're all about. Council has quite a decent role in that. We need you to be strong in difficult economic times. That's what you would expect. The private sector obviously hasn't got such great times at the moment. We need the public sector to be strong through this period. You see the government doing that, of course. Look, separately from our submission, we were asked what more we could do in COVID-19 times to perhaps help out a bit. You have a list in front of you of those items. I'm not going to go and labour those. They're pretty self-explanatory. Of course, the objective is to improve job outcomes as much as possible. And I'm going to assume that you've read our submission, and I'm not going to labour on that too much. I suspect you want to talk about rates and commercial rates and things like that, so I might just talk about that, and then we can save any other stuff. So in terms of our position on rates in general, we support 4.7% increase. We support increases to rates in general, and the reason for that is you're probably always going to be faced with rating pressure. So there is a need to confront that and to develop a really good strategy over the course of time, and of course to do extra that will be needed. So we support that. The increase in the differential, the progressive increase agreed in the long-term plan up to 1.2. We're not seeking to relitigate. I don't think there's any value in that, so that would appear fine. The UAGC change was a bit more of a surprise, and I'm not sure that was as well consulted. So the challenge with that is it probably has a larger effect in terms of what businesses pay for rates, because they tend to have larger capital values. And really what you should be considering is it appropriate to be having those high levels of change in a economically difficult and probably recessionary environment? Bearing in mind that a rates differential is a blunt measure, right? It targets property owners, sometimes they're businesses, sometimes they're simply landlords and pass it on. So you may well inadvertently be targeting smaller businesses through doing that. So look, we've suggested a softening in that UAGC general rates balance, and I'd like you to consider that. And I guess in terms of the wider discussion, look, this is a long-term plan discussion, but what's really needed is an intelligent and collegial partnership-based discussion with the business community. I heard a number of you talk when I was here, what was that, Tuesday, around bringing the community along with us. And I think that's what's going to be needed as far as your general rating policy and your commercial rates. And that needs to be a full discussion, right? Rates differentials are one piece. As I said, they're a blunt measure. Generally not well regarded by the business community, who would prefer targeted rates. So are targeted rates more appropriate? What's your capital spend going to be? Are you investing in the right things? Could the private sector potentially invest in some of those things instead? And also what amenity and infrastructure value do businesses get? So I guess all we're asking for is for that wider discussion to be had in a partnership manner. We're obviously here to help you with that. And we all know we need to do that for the benefit of the city. A couple of things that I think help out with that. So one probably untouched and one good progress is being made on. So the first one would be, I guess, an industrial land policy for the city. What we face now is a difficult situation where we have a lack of industrial land, and we also, and you'll see in the media over the next couple of days, we have some difficulty with how we use that land as well. And that is not something I feel we have a good handle on as a city. It is difficult from our perspective to channel people in the right direction, and also to avoid some of the challenges we have now. We don't want to create those again in decades to come, right? So we need to have a really good view of that. That will, of course, help the future direction of the city and the rating discussion, as will the Urban Form and Transport Initiative. And look, I wanted to congratulate you all. I think it's, in this term, you've made big strides with government. UFTI shows that. You would have heard Ernst talk the other day. And that means a lot in terms of, I guess, value to the business community and a path forward, which of course helps any of these discussions around rates as well. So well done on that. It's made quite a big difference, and we look forward to that continuing. And with that, I think I've only used 6 minutes. So happy to take any questions after. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nigel. Glenn, do you have any... Greg, do you have anything to add to the submission?
Nothing to add,
No,
but
brilliant.
so far ahead with questions.
Thank you. Questions, colleagues? I'll go... We actually have 3. I'll have Councillor Hughes, Councillor Baldock, and then finish with Councillor Robson. Councillor Hughes, over to you.
That'll help too.
Yeah. The industrial land policy. What kind of things do you see in that to create some change that we need?
I think we just need a plan. Currently, we've got Te Riko, second largest industrial development in New Zealand, going quite well, but that we probably need 20 hectares of land in the Western Bay a year in terms of demand. That can't keep up with that. We have Rangiru, we don't know quite what's happening with that. And we obviously have the Mount as an industrial area, but with an airshed over it. So, and obviously some challenges around emissions. So to be friendly to business and frankly, just to make sure we can steer this in the right direction, we need a better plan for how we manage that across the Western Bay, but obviously as kind of 3/4 of the population and industry base, Tauranga City needs to have a big say in that. Yeah. So I believe that's a smart growth discussion, but should be firmly led by TCC.
Councillor Baldock and Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Nigel. Appreciate your comments on the differential and the issue of the UAGC, which is impacting on the business. But we're torn with this residential business. You know, a median of 1% increase with residential would go up a lot more if that UAGC wasn't reduced another 5%. So we have to kind of look at that. But in the long-term plan, I guess you're open to the discussion going further about targeted rates and the differential.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so it's really just about, in partnership with the business community, figuring out what the most intelligent solution is. So I guess no one shies away from the fact that you're going to be under severe rating pressure for a long period of time, and you probably would have seen the business community largely say, look, we don't have enough, right? We don't see enough infrastructure coming. That causes productivity loss, etc. And obviously environmental difficulties and the like. So it's really about just getting around the table and agreeing what's most appropriate. But generally, targeted rates are favoured over differentials because they actually, one, they get to business, not landlord. And secondly, I guess, if you use, you pay, which seems fair.
Just a quick supplementary. I mean, we've had one submitted this morning complaining about how much we are investing in infrastructure, so and growth and everything else. We would assume the business community sees that the majority of what we are rating them for is for their benefit, getting out of this crisis and seeing jobs kept and so on, because that's where we spend most of our money.
I might have said this before, but the story around that, the narrative and being able to see exactly what that goes on, I don't think is as clear as it could be. So the likes of UFTI, but probably more importantly how you'll execute UFTI, will be really important to that. And then also I think you would bring into that, well, where are public-private partnerships? How can we accelerate some of the stuff and make sure we target it to the right areas? I don't think the business community in general believe that, I mean, I think they sympathise with the difficult financial position of council and seek different ways to solve the same problem.
Quick question, please, Councillor Robson.
As quick as I can. Hey tangata, hey tangata, hey tangata. ED is about people. A couple of times in your presentation, Mr. Tutt, you've alluded to there needs to be a partnership agreement, a partnership discussion, intelligent discussion between council and the business community. Where does the non-business community, the majority of our ratepayers, the people of the city who aren't business people, fit into that discussion? Do you see council as the broker? We talk to the business community, then we talk to the rest of the community, and then we arbitrate? Or do you think it should be a tripartite discussion?
Thank you, John. My favour would be a tripartite discussion. And I guess the biggest part for that to me is what prosperity looks like in terms of how well off are you being in Tauranga City and what are your future aspirations as far as that goes. I think we all face the big challenge that I think we all see there is that we have household income that lags the rest of the country in terms of average, which needs to be improved, and we also have very high cost of living, so the west in the country. So how collectively can we shift that dial so that the economic well-being of the city benefits everyone?
Thank you, Nigel and Greg, and thank you for the work that you and Priority One do for our residents and our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll be deliberating towards the end of the month. Thank you. Our next speaker, colleagues, is Anton Steele from Film Bay of Plenty. And does that look like Glenn Dougal there? Look, I knew there was another Glenn in the chamber. I had a feeling, I had the vibe. Look, Anton, are you comfortable being on camera? Because we're live streaming on YouTube. You all right? Okay, good as gold. Page 485 of your agenda, colleagues. Anton, so we've got 10 minutes allocated, and if you finish a little earlier, like the previous speaker, there may be some questions.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
I've just got a slideshow that I shall click into. Kia ora koutou. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Tauranga City Council for the support of the last 3 years. Where I recently had a role review done by a person who ran Film Otago Southland for 17 years, and he said what we have achieved in 3 years, it took him 10 years to do. So I just really want to honour the part that Tauranga's had in doing that, and the local community, and also the board that have kind of done such a fantastic job of supporting us. So Film Bay of Plenty is a sector-based economic development agency. We're industry building industry, here to grow the screen media industry in the region. And I'm going to lead off with showing you a bit of local industry. With no music. Oh well. If you can imagine a pumping soundtrack, this is a promo for a web series that was shot just before lockdown. It's called Chloe and the, and I'll be speaking a little bit about it shortly. It's written and starring Alyssa Stringfellow, who is a Mount Maunganui-based actress, and used all kind of Mount Maunganui and Tauranga crew and cast. And we're very, very excited to see it happening. Good, good. We'll stop that and click on. So, right now, we're facing a real opportunity in New Zealand, and a very strong opportunity. Due to COVID-19, there is a lot of companies around the world looking to come to New Zealand. The screen media industry overall is worth $177 billion and $3 billion annually to New Zealand. Currently, right now, we've got 6 productions that have kind of come from overseas that are bringing about approximately $400 million into the local region. So there's a real opportunity for New Zealand and the Bay of Plenty to kind of step up to help service this industry. And for kind of what that would mean, I won't labour too long on this slide, but this is an example of what a series could mean. It could mean $16 million being spent very quickly into the local region, going out amongst the local community. So it's kind of, and salaries, kind of materials, construction, this can all happen very, very, very quickly. To service this, we've been working very, very hard towards establishing film studios within the region. We had a feasibility study done by one of the top screen media consultancies in the world, Olsberg, and we kind of shared that with councillors in October through our newsletter. I realised that there's been a changeover of kind of councillors coming onto the council since then, so if anybody would like a copy of that feasibility study, please feel free to contact me. We are in, we're very close to setting up 1.0 of film studios here in the Bay of Plenty region in Rotorua, and we should be kind of making an announcement about that in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. What we're looking to do infrastructure-wise in Tauranga is setting up a mocap studio. So this is motion capture. This is kind of very forward-facing part of the industry. It's becoming increasingly used in gaming and large budget films. There's no one doing it in New Zealand yet. We've got a partnership with a company that's been doing this for 23 years in Los Angeles, one of the original motion capture companies, and an individual that's willing to drive this, and we're partnering with. And he's let me know last night that he's also got a piece of land that he's got eyeing up for this project as well. So this is kind of very forward-facing technology that we're really kind of wanting to encourage and bring into the region. So Film Bay of Plenty is about increasing the infrastructure in the region. We're about attracting productions. 2 weeks ago, I had the producer of The Luminaries here in the region. She's got a TV series based on the book Call Me Evie there that they're looking to bring into production in 2021. We've got our first TV series, which is looking to shoot here in Rotorua and Western Bay in spring, and they've committed to spending $2 million in the region, which is, again, it's really fantastic. It looks like we had a feature film with a major Game of Thrones star in Taupo in early summer, and we've also got another TV series that will be looking to come into Rotorua in early next year as well. So we're working very, very strong to attract productions, and it's a really strong time with Auckland and Wellington being so busy. Local producers really are looking to the regions and how we can service that. As you've seen, we're very kind of focused as well on growing local productions, something like Chloe and the Crash Test, which we just showed you the silent promo for. That's kind of budgeted about $500,000 for a series. It could provide jobs for 20 local people for the run of that, and they're looking to do 2 to 3 seasons of that series. So we're really kind of looking at ways to encourage local productions, and also kind of looking at ways to monetize that from not just within New Zealand but overseas, and also through partnerships with brands. So we're kind of helping to make these things happen, helping create jobs for locals here in Tauranga. We're also really focused on upskilling and training the local industry. Recently, we've had a couple of major sponsorships of local Tauranga residents over the last 6 months through a company called Share the Knowledge, which is kind of really doing top-level upskilling. We've had Tracy Hampton, who's done a line producing course. We recently had a guy named Jamie Logan learning how to use a techno dolly. I won't go into what a techno dolly is. We don't really have time to talk about that. But and also with the upcoming production we've managed that's going to be shooting in spring, we've got 15 to 20 entry-level positions that we've been partnering with the MSD Mana and Mahi program. We've also got, facilitated 9 into what we call attachments for mid-level career people to upskill. So we're really focused on building the local industry up and the skill of the local industry, because we can't just build empty boxes for them to come film in. We really need that to kind of give jobs to local people, and it's also a major part of attracting productions here, is building up that local skill. We're here to connect, and that's connecting crew with work, that's connecting crew together, that's also connecting nationally and internationally. So we're here to facilitate and connect the industry within the Bay of Plenty region, and we're also, we're connecting and collaborating on a national level. To give you an example, when we first came along 3 years ago, there was Screen Auckland, Film Otago Southland, and Screen Wellington. Now we've got several other film offices that have sprung up in that type, and we've also really made a major effort in terms of bringing Film Bay of Plenty and Tauranga onto the national kind of identity. So moving forward, we'd really love to find ways to work more collaboratively with TCC, TBOP, CBOP and Priority 1 to grow the industry within the Bay of Plenty. We've got confirmed ongoing support for the next 3 years from Rotorua. We've got support from Western Bay, Taupo and Opotiki for the next year. Still waiting on word from Whakatane and Kawerau, and we'd love to have Tauranga as part of that journey as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anton. We've time for one question. Councillor Clout.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anton, for coming in and for the amazing work that Film Bay of Plenty is doing. I guess the question I have is that, given that a lot of the investment and development is in the Rotorua area, how does Tauranga get the benefits of our investment?
As I said, I pointed out the mocap studio, which is will be hopefully one of my next major projects here in Tauranga, with productions like the one that's going into Western Bay and Rotorua in spring. A lot of the crew are based here, and I've got connections with them. We had 30 people along to a networking last night, and I was like, let me know if you're interested in work on this, because I can help facilitate that. So there's work and employment, and I really recognise there's a large community of grassroots filmmakers here in Tauranga, and I've got a lot of connection and a lot of, I really want to see them shine. So,
Thank you, Anton and team. We'll be making our decisions in a couple of weeks, followed by a final sign-off by the end of the month. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Colleagues, our next presenter is Matt Cowley, also a photogenic bloke. Page 982 of the agenda. Thank you, Matt. I shouldn't say that just before the speaker's got 10 minutes to fire back. Welcome back, Matt. The Chamber of Commerce's submission is on page 982 of your agenda. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lovely. Look, it's been an incredibly big week, massive month. I know July is usually a time where you guys get to take some time off around, after a big 6 months, but this is probably one of your biggest months that you'll face. It's been a big week, lots of big decisions and implications, so I very much appreciate your time. Before I get started, I wanted to say a very special thanks to Tauranga City Council's call centre staff during lockdown. There was a joint initiative with Tourism Bay of Plenty, Priority 1 and the Tauranga Chamber of Commerce. We were calling as many businesses as we could just to check in on them and let them know where they could find help. Through Anne Blakeway, we were able to find out that your call centre, with any available capacity, were able to help us with that. So that was greatly appreciated. So our submission hasn't really changed since the first round of consultation. I'm not really here to load you with surveys or testimonies or compelling argument or trying to fight against the current. I don't think I need to, unless you've been living in a bubble for sorry, bad COVID joke. Yeah, sorry. I was in Tauriko yesterday checking in on a few current and prospective chamber members, and a couple of the big properties they didn't know about council's draft plan and what their commercial rates impact was going to be. And so I suppose a large part of our conversation, this submission, is around communications, commercial rates, and of course the city centre. And of course we're currently, my team's working with Mayor Tembi Powell's team to arrange a time so elected members can share your annual plan decisions and your logic with the chamber followers. So that's our members and non-member customers. So I'll just quickly jump into the communications. So I think COVID was a really good lesson for the council around proactive communication leadership for the community. I suppose there were a number of councils across Australasia and New Zealand, Australasia. They were very upfront and vocal with their communities as COVID was hitting. This council, on the other hand, at the very end of lockdown, the information that they shared was very valuable. They understood that the community was hurting and going through a number of things, but it was at the end of lockdown, and in a vacuum of information, people start drawing their own conclusions. So, and the decisions that you made, particularly around the hardship fund for the licence to occupy, was very much appreciated, and I'm working with Paul Davidson's staff to ensure that all the main streets are aware of what's available. As you lead into UFTI, Council will need to be proactive and lead the communications. This doesn't mean hiring a big community engagement team. There are plenty of umbrella organisations and networks right across the four wellbeings that can help facilitate this conversation using your very factual information. Use these trusted networks to your cost-effective advantage. Of course, you're about to undergo a massive project to operationalise UFTI. I'm unsure if you heard the recordings of the council meetings, because straight afterwards, each council had their own meeting. You were in the other room for the other council meetings, but there was a lot of hesitations and reservations before they resolved. So, the detail is the hard work's yet to start on around what UFTI is going to look like. Many of you said during the election that the council is in a trust rebuilding phase with the community. If you can rebuild trust over time, you'll create a social licence with the community to implement your plans. However, we're still in the very early stages of that trust rebuilding phase, and you need to prove that you can stick to your agreed plans as part of that building trust. So let's go move on to rates, commercial rates in the UAGC. Our membership, just discussions with a lot of members, and it was great to have our first BA5, 150 people rubbing shoulders Wednesday. That was awesome. Our membership's pretty split. A lot of them are wanting me to push quite hard on a rates freeze, but now's not the time for a rates freeze given the city's issues and the fact that we need to rebuild ourselves out of this economic recovery. The Chamber also supports a modest increase in rates, support with a good rates postponement policy that's well articulated and is pretty friendly, given that there's a number of people, residential and businesses, that are facing different degrees of hardship. So you agreed with the community in 2018 to increase commercial rates, and you followed through with that. So, yep. You also agreed to gradually change the UAGC over time. The council at the time, of course. However, in this draft annual plan, you have decided to speed up decreasing the UAGC. This has caused a compounding rates impact on commercial properties in the midst of an economic crisis. As part of rebuilding the trust with the community, whether you can demonstrate that you can stick to your agreement, you can streamline your processes, you're prioritising essential spending, and of course you're selling down any non-essential assets. Keep to the 2018 plan, prove you can deliver, and let's all focus on that long-term plan, because of course the next long-term plan will be the most important long-term plan since the GFC. About the city centre, there are many things that, of course, I could comment about, but I just asked not to give lip service or to the CBD. Many of you mentioned the importance of the CBD in your election campaigns. The council this week adopted a strategy that calls for a polycentric city. This is different from a traditional city zoning model with almost like a tree trunk lines, with a dominant CBD, industrial and suburbia out on the fringes. We cannot afford to have competing strategies with the CBD. You have a city plan review coming up, I understand, in this triennium. You need to ensure your strategy and your aspirations for the city centre is reflected in your budget and the city plan rules, and just having that consistency throughout all your tools. And it also comes back to good communications and using your trusted network, and it was quite sad to see that there was not one mention of downtown Tauranga in your city centre agenda paper this week. Just making sure that you've got consistency across all your tools. Look, and finally, 6 minutes. The Chamber agrees and supports the Council CFOs to investigate funding and financial options to implement UFTI. It's fair to acknowledge that current and future residents and businesses will ultimately pay and fund it, but how is, of course, what mechanisms is the further work that needs to go through. These need to include financial tools with the local community wealth entities and, of course, private-public partnerships. There's many and various, and we all need to reflect on why this work, I think it was around 2011 and 12, there was a lot of good work that was done and why that was stopped. And it's not so much on the tools, but the lack of implementation of that research. So, look, the Chamber will hold thought leadership events and content using various experts across New Zealand over the next 12 months to help keep this conversation live in the business community. So please use us to your advantage and help engage the community. Pretty much we are the only membership-based organisation in this region that can transcend so many different industries, so many different industry sectors, and of course, let's all work together to engage that business community through the long-term plan and detailing what exactly UFTI is going to look like. Thank you. Here for any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions on the Chamber's submission from colleagues? Councillor Avery.
A couple. So the Chamber's position would be for UAGC of 15%. And did you notice a tension between smaller businesses and larger businesses in terms of some wanting a smaller UAGC and some wanting a larger UAGC?
Yeah, no, we didn't do any detailed surveys that was of any significance that could break into it. No, everyone was giving their own personal opinion, and there wasn't any clear trend between smaller and larger businesses.
Councillor Baldock, yep.
Yeah, how useful is the rate calculator on our website for the businesses within the Chamber that actually own their own properties or see a direct rate impact, that they can trace?
Yeah, no, but it's good. Those tools are good for those that were aware of it and those that followed the discussion that we had with Paul Davison and Christine Jones. Yeah, we made it pretty clear for businesses to go use that tool.
Think they are. If we have this meeting with everybody, we'd like to know that most people in the room have tested their own rates and can talk about that.
As far as we can as far as we can work together to help promote it, hopefully they can.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Matt. And we'll be looking to deliberate in only just a couple of weeks' time, so thank you. Colleagues, our next speaker is Catherine Lellman, speaking about the Tauranga Arts Festival Trust, and her submission is on page 1062, although if you scroll forward to 1067, that's the pertinent page of your agenda. Welcome, Catherine. There's 10 minutes to use as you see fit, but if you finish a little earlier, then my colleagues may have some questions. Thank you, and over to you. If you wouldn't mind pressing the purple button. Brilliant.
Morena. Ko Catherine Lellman aho. I'm speaking to you today in my role as the chairperson of the Tauranga Arts Festival Trust. We bring arts events to Tauranga every year, which aim to provide experiences which expand minds, delight audiences, and touch all corners of our community. My written submission urged the elected members to support and acknowledge the importance of arts and culture when making your deliberations on the annual plan. Every day, the arts play an essential role in our lives. As Michael Moynihan, the chair of the Arts Council New Zealand, Toi Aotearoa, said recently to territorial authorities, they help us feel connected, see things from new perspective, make sense of the world, feel good about where we live, and find new inspiration. These are all incredibly important attributes in such unprecedented times as we've experienced this year. The changes that have been wrought by COVID-19 have been keenly felt by those of us in the arts sector and the practitioners and audiences alike. For our own organisation, we had to cancel our biennial Escape Festival, which is usually held over Queen's Birthday weekend. But arts practitioners are creative, adaptable and resourceful. Our own organisation has led the way during lockdown by bringing arts into homes and hearts through our social media platforms and connections. Arts organisations will be able to help your council find innovative and cost-effective solutions to emerging challenges. The arts is going to play, I would submit, a vital role in recovery, and we only have to look to the post-Christchurch earthquake experience where we saw the role that arts played, helping revitalise the CBD there and empty commercial and public spaces, the way it brought communities together and it brought people back into the city and helped them overcome the fear that they felt about doing that. Central government has already recognised this in their own response to the creative sector. There's a $25 million support package which has been granted to the sector over the next 2 years. The Honourable Carmel Sepuloni, who's the Associate Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, recently said, "Cultural activities will provide the social glue and the boost to morale that will help us through, as we're seeing already." Her vision, and indeed mine, is that the cultural sector won't be a victim of COVID-19, but rather a vital contributor to the New Zealand recovery. And if we look for some quantitative support for that, the New Zealand and the Arts survey last conducted in 2017 confirmed that New Zealanders believe that arts make their communities better places to live and agree that they should be part of everyone's education. In the Bay of Plenty specific part of that survey, over half of the residents surveyed supported the public funding of the arts, and an additional 44% believed that local council should financially support the arts. Our own organisation survey post our festival last year in October-November 2019, 92% of respondents strongly agreed that it increased their pride in Tauranga having an event like ours. 97% said it made Tauranga a more enjoyable place to live. Over 12% of the attendees at our festival last year came from out of town, and of that, more than a third said they specifically came for the festival, and it starts over a long weekend and Labour weekend. Your annual plan aims to do more to help local businesses cope with the impacts of the recession. You are already working closely with organisations in the commercial sector. What I'm urging you to do and encouraging elected members and council staff is to also look to engage the arts leaders, the venue managers, the arts practitioners as you chart your way and our way through this in order to support our community. Success measures are not just economic, although obviously we all recognise the importance of that, but nurturing community wellbeing is a key pillar of a healthy city and a healthy community and for its leaders. We know from the research that Creative New Zealand undertakes that New Zealanders value the arts, and they value the contribution that they make to vibrant and cohesive and prosperous communities. Specifically in terms of the annual plan, and this is not a change that affects our organisation, but the planned reduction in the events framework funding, which is 200,000, or approximately 70 events per year, in my submission to you will not increase social or improve social cohesion or build community spirit. That's much needed as we have the post-COVID world. So I recognise certainly the need to make cuts to address the loss of revenue, but I'm urging you to minimise that in the events sector and to plan for the reinstatement at the very least of that events funding in 2022. We do need to take heed of the guidance that Creative New Zealand and the central government are giving to territorial authorities, and to continue to invest in arts and culture offerings so that this city can adapt, that we can recover and we can thrive. E hara tokatoa, e te toa takitahi, e nare hitoa takatine. My strength is not that of the individual, it is of the collective, and the arts organisations are very keen to be part of that collective. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your submission, Catherine. Are there any questions from colleagues? Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. And I think you made a very, very good submission. You opened the door for me to ask a question because we very seldom hear it. You made the comment there that you hope you'll see the funding returned in 2022. I don't think I've heard anybody else have such a balanced approach, because we are in a crisis and we're having to prioritise things which will deliver the quickest it can. So, is that the crux of it for you, that if we have to take some cutbacks in the short term, so long as we're sure we're going to continue to return that support in the long term?
Yes, I think I'm asking the elected members and council staff not to lose sight and to really treat this as very temporary. And as I say, in terms of that specific submission, our own funding, we have a commitment from that in terms of our being a legacy event. But I'm trying to encourage the engagement at the table and the continuation of taking, a broader picture about what wellbeing means for our city and how we get started again.
Any further questions, colleagues? No, thank you, Catherine. So we'll be deliberating on your submission and the others in about a fortnight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, our next submitter is Mary Dillon. Welcome, Mary. Come on up. And Mary is representing today EnviroHub Bay of Plenty. You not? What? Not? No, it's 1131 of your... so is the EnviroHub submission not on today, Mary? Or this is a personal one?
Need to make that clear.
Yep.
I've got 2 submissions.
Yes.
And I got an urgent ring from somebody last night to say they didn't have the second submission.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that everybody's got a copy of that
Okay, yes.
before I speak to it.
No, we don't.
I've got a copy here if somebody wants it to run off.
Okay, no, we don't have a copy of the second
No,
submission.
well,
so-
that's going to make it a little bit difficult. Do you want to do somebody else? And if you can run this off, then maybe I can wait a minute. But somebody needs to take this and
Actually, it's not a bad... Mr. Peterson, would you mind giving a submission, your submissions earlier? Is that all right for you, or would you still... Yeah, Rob. Is 30 minutes all right?
There's 3 submissions on there.
Yep, is 30 minutes all right with you, Mary?
Yes, I shall wait with interest.
Yeah, Mary's happy to wait if you're happy to come forward. But equally, if you're not okay with doing it right now, that's fine too.
Mary is happy to...
Yeah, Mary's happy to wait. Yep. Thank you, Rob. So moving forward to Mr. Patterson's first submission on behalf of Sally Patterson.
Yes.
That is on page 213 of your agenda, colleagues. And I'm assuming you'll just sort of naturally flow into each one. There'll be a logical break point in between.
Yes, I would think so. I'll make an initial observation and,
Okay.
and that will show you where I'm coming from on it. Is that on? Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll just tell them the other page number as well from the second submission, colleagues, is page 618. And I have a submission ID for Citizens Advocacy Tauranga, so you can look that up in it's like an index in your agenda. That's submission number 799. So those are the 3 submissions. And thank you for being flexible and coming forward
okay.
earlier,
That's
Rob.
fine.
Much appreciated. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. Mr Chairman, members of the Policy Committee, that's councillors, thank you for this opportunity to address this meeting and present these submissions. There are 4 submissions involved here, and I will proceed in the following order. Sally Patterson, and that's on the initial plan, ID 065. I'll explain why I'm presenting that on her behalf later on. Myself, Rob Patterson, on the initial plan, ID 146. Rob Patterson again on the revised plan, that's another submission, and that doesn't have an ID number. To my knowledge, I haven't been advised of it.
Yes, that's 799, colleagues.
It has one?
Yep.
Okay. Citizens Advocacy Tauranga, that's on the revised plan, that's CAT. I don't have an ID number there, and I'm not sure. There's probably been one provided now. Okay. Before I proceed at the outset, could I just stress and make the point that the submission process has been rather messy. Online submissions, in my view, have not worked well, certainly not for us, and in my case, have not captured the text of who was making the submission in some cases, nor acknowledgements given, nor submission numbers allocated at that stage. I understand that's not surprising. The revised plan submissions closed at 5 p.m. on the 1st of July. With regard to myself and the CAT subs, all were lumped into one, which is confusing for everyone and needs some clarification, I guess. The process has been disappointing. It's been short on detail, information, and I think TCC should have just dealt with all the submissions at one time. That's the initial one and the revised ones, which effectively is what is happening now in a roundabout makeshift sort of way. Be that as it may, the main thrust of all these submissions have basically a common thread. Request for zero rates rise, or a rates freeze if you would like to call it that. The uniform general rate differential, the reduction there, the opposing of that. The rubbish proposal, which although not forming part of this particular annual plan, is lurking in the background and is going to arise very shortly, so I think it should be dealt with here. Reductions in cost seem to be trivial. The big ticket items have not been addressed. CAPEX details are fuzzy. Staff numbers and wages orders have been avoided, and discretionary spending continues on the nice to haves. That's the observation of these submissions. I have seen submissions made inter alia by others. One, Taxpayer Union, Jordan Williams, that's a pro forma submission that he's made to most councils, that's ID 003. I think that was heard yesterday, I may be wrong, yes, okay. And I agree with that submission, we agree with it. Two, Philip Brown, Papamoa Ratepayers Association, it was probably in his own, not sure whether it was his own right or in the Papamoa Ratepayers ID 087, that was heard yesterday as well. And generally I agree with that, particularly the rates freeze, rubbish collection, growth, misconceptions and the expenditure issues. Three, Barry Scott, ID 130, that was heard yesterday too, I believe, which makes some very good and sound points. I would note there that on rates of around about 160 million, a 4.7% increase is only going to yield you another 7.52 million on my calculation. 1%, that's another figure, is about 1.6 million. And that's fairly pitiful from an income point of view, from what you're trying to get. I think it's actually in there to allow you to borrow more. I may be wrong about that, but it looks as though if you get more income, you can borrow more. In view of the confusion and short notice, these four submissions may come across as a bit messy, a little disjointed and confusing, perhaps even a little bit repetitive. I apologise for that, but I can't help that in the circumstances and will do my best I can with what I have. If I could turn to submission by Sally Peterson, that's a submission on the initial plan. Her submission number ID 065.
It's 213 of your agenda, colleagues. Page 213.
Sorry?
Page 213 of their agenda.
Okay, that's fine. That's on the initial draft plan, is not the revised plan. I'm authorised to speak to this submission on her behalf, as she has just come out of hospital and in the past week and cannot attend. Matters concerning her were and are infrastructure, that there needs to be some concentration, if you like, on roading, water, stormwater and sewerage and the basic essentials. And council needs to concentrate on these and shelve the nice to haves in the current environment. In other words, just stick to the knitting. Two, proposed rates increase. Now said to average 4.7. At the stage she made this, it was 7.6. There should be zero rates increase for the 2021 financial year, or a rates freeze for all properties, residential, commercial, or any other there may be there, having due regard to the current dire and looming financial climate caused by the COVID-19 issues. In particular, rates on a property she has an interest in have, and that's slightly better than average, I'd say, have gone up 6.8%, and it's a relatively normal property. It hasn't gone up 4.7, 6.8. Three, the project shelved, particularly proposed compulsory rubbish collection scheme for many reasons already fully outlined to council by myself, Kat, and a lot of other submissions. Four, the uniform rating part, the reduction there, coming back from about 20% to 10%. That's not quite right on the figures that are there, but it's a general idea of what's happened. No, she considers that unfair, that uniform annual general rating charge. It's an ideological thing to try and rob from the, to try and rob from the rich to pay for what council perceives as the poor, which may not always be the case, of course. Commercial differential, 1.12. I don't have a problem, or she doesn't have a problem with that either. With that figure, it may be justified, but it needs further analysis to see what it should be, and it certainly shouldn't be imposed at this time, because that's going to fall back on tenants of business properties. It'll get the landlord to start with, but it'll certainly be passed on to tenants. Summary. Everything needs to be on the table for assessment. The comment she makes late in the piece, or as a summary part, is a proper analysis of council figures do not, in her view, support the claim TCC is keeping within the 250% debt ratio guidelines. Council are spending money wastefully on projects that are often unnecessary and come in way over budget. This spending has to cease. In addition, staffing levels and wages paid look to be too high. There needs to be an independent staff audit. It's very hard from the outside looking in to say they're high or anything else, but an independent staff audit would show what the situation is, and that would be with a view to reducing staff numbers and wages. Last year, TCC staff wages rose 9.25% from what I can see, when inflation was running about 2%. Those increases, of course, could come from wages or from an increase in staff numbers. The current financial year must put everything on hold. The status quo remain in place and a complete freeze in all discretionary spending. That is her submission.
Thank you, Rob. Would you like to take questions at the end?
Oh no, now it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
If I can answer them, yeah.
Okay. Any questions of this particular submission, colleagues? No. If we can move on to your second submission,
fine.
Rob. Thank you.
Okay, the second submission is myself, and that is on the question, that's the initial plan submission I made. I'll try and go through that reasonably quickly. The question is asked here, which infrastructure investments are the most important to you and why? I've answered that there, and it'll be before you. That's roading, water, stormwater, sewage disposal, rubbish collection and recycle. All the basic necessities are what are important. Other parts there, no information on the budget lists, financial details, recapex, etc. My view on the proposed rate increase, I think it should definitely be a rates freeze, having regard to the financial hardship caused and resulting from the Chinese virus, I'll call it, also known as COVID-19. Severe financial hardship is being felt, and I think that pain is going to get worse. And it's going to be for most of the year, probably a good deal longer. I think one of the British assessments was 300 years. I don't know if they go that far, but it's a fair amount of time. What projects would I think should be looked at? Well, clearly, enabling growth and strategic planning are flawed concepts in my view. Council needs to abandon the mandatory council rubbish collection scheme, and I've submitted to that previously, probably under the referendum process, and to council staff earlier this week, actually. Things like the Visitor Information Centre, that will have no use for years, obviously, at the moment. Not going to be many tourists coming in. Welcome Bay Supermarket stuff, that is no concern of councils. Coolum Park, I think that is an unnecessary upgrade. It's a cost, it's not a great cost, it's $1 million odd. CBD developments including Wharf Street and Elizabeth Street, which are way too expensive and make no difference to 95% of Tauranga citizens in day-to-day living. Once again, concentrate on the essential infrastructure and stick to the basics. Local Government Act needs to be strictly complied with. If there's a cost of around $9 million for rubbish bins, that they should not be purchased until this whole matter of rubbish is looked at. Uniform annual charge, 10%, that reducing back, and that's for the lower valued properties. They get the benefit of that. I believe it's discriminatory, and in fact, all ratepayers have equal access to use the same facilities and services no matter what the value of those properties is. I'm urging council not to reduce that charge of benefiting lower value properties at the expense of higher value properties. Commercial differential, well, we've dealt with that. Submitters aren't necessarily against that. It's just that it's not the time to do it, and I think it needs better analysis on it to show that what is happening is the right thing to do, and the status quo should remain in place. Development contributions, yes, by all means, put them under the microscope, must take fact that we're in uncertain financial times and it takes some time to recover. Council should do nothing to make the position worse. That is my submission.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. So that concludes Rob's personal submission. Any questions of that submission, colleagues? No, there being none, would you have you got Citizens Advocacy Tauranga's submission?
All right, these are the revised ones.
Yep.
Now we're dealing with, yes.
And that's submission ID 799.
The first one will be me there on that one, my one, sorry. I did make a correction there because when it came back, it was showing what I hadn't answered, I believe, and I think Council are aware of what my answers were to 3 questions there. I believe they've been notified of those. And they were highlighted. First one was Council proposed to add 200,000 to the creation and implementation of a sustainable framework led by TCC, etc. I put, it's got I agreed, I don't, I disagree. Council proposed to add an additional 130 to priority 1 to support economic, Scott, I agree, I don't, I disagree. And the third one is Council proposed not to add 200,000 to the Memorial Park. At put I disagreed, I agree not to add it. So those were the 3 alterations there, and I think Council should have been informed of that from what I've been told here. Rates increase, 4.7. which has changed from the original one of 7.6, strongly disagreed with that for the same reasons, should be a rates freeze. The savings made in the budget, I strongly disagreed with that. I say don't go far enough and they're effectively only temporary and they're all trivial. Saving on major non-essential items and ongoing issue of staff wages have not been addressed, which could result in much better savings, I believe. Temporary changes, that's not terribly relevant there. I do believe I disagreed with cutting 50,000 from the budget to reduce harbour encroachments because this has been an ongoing matter for perhaps 10, 15 years. You've got rid of most of them, but there's still some lurking around or they return again. It's really not good enough to allow that, not be costing council anything. They should be able to get not adding it, taking it out. I agree with that. It shouldn't never have been there at all. This thing's been around for probably 13 to 15 years also. The cost has always been pretty high. There's never been really any proper public consultation on it. Would be of use to very few residents. I'm a walker and I might use it, but a lot of people probably wouldn't. There will be major objections from the residents in the area, there's no doubt about that. If a structure is placed in the water, then it could be an environmental hazard. You're going to have to go fair height to get over high tides, and it's unlikely to get various consents to intrude into the harbour anyway, if that is what the intention is. I'm not quite sure what council's current intention is there. It's always been a question of costs, and costs have always been prohibitive. On the question of CapEx work, all work, unless it's in progress, should stop, or unless it's vitally essential, of course. In the current annual plan budget, less than 50% of the work that I can see there can be classed as essential infrastructure. The rest can fairly be classed as what I'd regard as non-essential work. Fees and charges, yes, that's fine as long as they're cost effective and applied to on a user pays basis. Valid debt, revenue and finance policy, yes, that's fine, provided you've got a valid debt repayment plan for borrowings for the debt incurred. And development contributions, yes, once again, developers should be paying up front. Those payments shouldn't be deferred if it can be avoided, and no liability should fall on residents and ratepayers or new homeowners. When I say new homeowners, suddenly some of it appears in their building consents. That's why your building consents are high. Some of it appears there. So developers should be hit with it right up front when they're developing and they start. They're the people making the money out of it, let them pay their way. On the question of other feedback in there now, I am requesting that this 4.7 be scrapped and back to the freeze. In the situation of a property I have an interest in, those rates have gone up to 5.65%. Once again, it's sort of an average property or slightly above it. The commercial rating differential, dropped a rates freeze on that too, and uniform annual general charge I've spoken on. All properties, no matter what their value, have the same access, as I've said, just ECC facility, roads, footpaths, sewage, stormwater, drinkable water and electricity, which is not provided by council, but it's in the mix. Current rating values already severely penalise the high value properties, and in the worst case scenario, the highest is up to 15 times more than the lowest. Now, before you say I'm wrong, I'll give you the example. It's Morgan's property over at the Mount. The rates there are 30,000. The lowest you have here is 2,000. It's pretty easy to work that 15 times 2 is 30. So it's 15 times as much. And that's not alone in it, I can tell you. There are other ones here where their rates have gone up 12.38%, 18.2, 18.12, 13.3, 17.15. Those ones are all on Marine Parade. It'll be much the same in the mall to a degree, probably also Kings Avenue, areas like that, Waratah Street and Ocean Beach Road. There'll be other areas not to the same degree. The values may not be that high, but it's the same effect. And I don't think, I'm not protecting people with wealthy properties by any means, but I'm saying where they're getting the same service, it's unfair to hit them again and have a go. They're already pretty much paying the piper. One thing I would mention on the question of council finances, and this has appeared last night and this morning in the Scoop Politics section, Local Government New Zealand is inviting New Zealand Maori Council to have an open book discussion on the financial position of 5 councils to set right the impression that they are potentially insolvent. This is in response to New Zealand Maori Council Executive, Tukaki, requesting the Office of the Auditor General to intervene and audit finances and management of the Far North District Council, Gisborne District Council, New Plymouth District Council, and wait for it, Tauranga City Council and Western Bay District Council. Mr Cull wants to assure them the councils are committed to the practice of financial management and independent oversight on the interests of their communities. Okay. And, to put it mildly, New Zealand Maori Council, in my view, can hardly be described as a paragon of virtue. It's interesting, they're interesting comments. Even they look to be able to see the writing on the wall. That is my submission.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions on Citizens Advocacy Tauranga submission? Mayor Powell.
Just generally, Rob. Firstly, just a quick comment on your on the last statement. The Minister's Office is dealing with the Māori Council on those issues that they've addressed to the 5 councils. So we've given a response, but it's going to be geared out of Minister Mahuta's office.
I'm not saying that, I don't know what the merit is in it, but I'm saying there it is. It's out in the news. And Dave Cull was the one, the chairman of Local Government New Zealand was the one that responded like that.
Yeah, they are too, but Minister Mahuta's office is going to as well, just to let you know. Rob, thank you for your submissions, all 3 of them, and that of your wife. I guess, you know, and having really listened to it, I read it before you arrived. The question that I've got very broadly is, and this is perhaps my perception or perspective, is that Tauranga lacks so much that cities, given we're New Zealand's fastest growing and 5th largest city, that cities smaller than us have by way of amenity, that we just don't have. And I'm specifically talking about a stadium, a museum, various parks and recreational facilities that we just struggle to have, in addition to all the other, to your point, core resources and amenities that we need, like roads, like upgrading our water supply, like the things that you would consider, as you said, to be core to council. Can I ask you, sir, how do we move forward on these things to enhance New Zealand's fastest growing and fifth largest city, if we don't spend money on these things which some of us, many of us, deem to be very important?
Well, let's deal with the stadium to start with. You bought a stadium despite everyone telling you not to 10 years ago. It's cost us a bloody fortune. Now you don't want to use it. Now you want to build something else up at the Domain, probably for 50 or 70 million, for about, at the best, 3 or 4 games a year, at the best. And these won't be top games. These are just games. They might be Super Rugby, but whatever. But you bought a stadium, you've got it there. Now no one uses it for what it's meant to be used for. I'm talking about Bay Park. It's a stadium. God, we paid plenty for it, and you want to see the bills, what are there now, they would make your eyes water. Anyway, that's Bay Park. Let's deal with the museum. That's been around since Adam was a cowboy, that lot. Well, the costs of it, that's not a question of building a museum, it's a question of what is it going to cost and where is it going to be sited. Now, it's going to be a special sort of museum, I guess, because it cannot be just, displaying your items. We've got too many at Newton Road anyway, which we're storing down there. So a museum of some sort, yes, if it was reasonably good, reasonable size, reasonably cheap. But this is not what's envisaged. This is some piece of art that's going to go up 70 million again. So I know Auckland spent about 115 million on part of an art gallery. I had a look at it, couldn't see where 115 million was anywhere near it. That was about 10 years ago. Up in Kitchener Street. You know the one I mean? Yep. So that's the question of that. I don't know, some of the stuff, but had council been prudent in the past, not spent money on stupid things, it could have some money here to do this stuff. It could have. Another example, take the swimming pool. Okay, in 2002, or thereabouts, that pool was built. Bay Wave? Okay. Built there in 2002. Cost of about 17 million. For another 3 million, it could have been a 50 metre pool. Didn't do it. Now, you've got an ideal facility there, which is not fit for purpose. Everyone said at the time, or as far as I did, everyone else said, well, spend a little bit more money, get the real thing that's going to be able to be used for everything, like surf, life-saving and whatever, So it's the council's fault, to a degree, that they're in a position we can't afford the stuff. But to another degree, they're looking for stuff that is too expensive and that most of the population aren't going to want to use. If you hadn't bought Bay Park, maybe you could look at the stadium. If you'd done the pool right, you wouldn't be looking at Memorial, which you're looking at now. All these things are there. They've all been mistakes, in my view, by council doing the wrong thing and not funding it as it should have, having, pie in the sky stuff or something else, or budgets going over or whatever. That's my observation. I'm not saying people agree with me, but some of these things there, they could have been there. You could have had them. And yeah, but I've been through all these things over a number of years. I think most people have been here a while will tell you that, and arguing about these things. And I'm not against progress, but you've got to look at this thing in the light of day and say, we just can't keep spending money or getting money and wasting money. It's not getting your bang for the buck, which is the real problem. And then it all ends up in rates. And people, we haven't got dear. Well, the rates are dear enough. And I think if you look at some of these ones here, you make your eyes water. Maybe you'll know a bit about Auckland rates. I bet you they know better.
Yeah,
exactly.
Look, thank you, gentlemen. I'll just conclude there. But no, thank you. It was a good interchange. I appreciate it. Thank you, Rob, for the flexibility of moving forward.
Yeah. I've got to do the cat one yet, though.
No, we've had the 3.
You had me.
We're
You
down
haven't had cat yet.
We have scheduled one from
Sally,
Sally,
one from me,
yes,
one from
and then
me,
one from Rob,
Kat.
and one from Kat. Yes, we've had the 3.
No, we've had 3, but that's
Yeah,
4.
we've had 3.
Yeah,
So
we need
we've
4.
got submission 65, Sally Patterson, represented by Rob Patterson.
Yeah.
Submission 146,
Yeah.
Rob Patterson, and submission 799. So we've had the timer on
That
the 3
wasn't Kat.
times.
That was actually me on the revised one.
Okay, we've had the 3. Honestly, we have. If you go back and check the tape, we've had the 3 10-minute slots.
Yeah, but they could.
Yeah.
But what I needed was 4.
4.
Basically.
Yeah, no.
This one here has to come in. I'll go through it quickly. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, we've had the 3 allocated, and we have to move on.
All right, well,
So,
that
yeah.
wasn't my understanding, and that's my problem with
Yep.
the whole thing. It becomes a mess.
Yeah. No, okay, thank you for coming in and thank you
Yeah.
for your flexibility moving forward.
Okay.
I guess because you went first, Mary Dillon's got a right reply of the museum. Look, hey, thank you, Mary. No, of course not. No, we've received your submission, Mary, which has been circulated around. So if you would come forward. Yes? John?
Just for clarification, I
Yep.
appreciate what you're saying as the chair in terms
Yep.
of the timetable, although it's different to the timetable that was circulated yesterday.
Yep.
Is there to be time for a submission from Citizens Advocacy Tauranga? Is that scheduled in our submissions process?
Yes, it was scheduled a few minutes ago. And we
that's
heard
it?
from it, and I called out submission 799, so we've dealt with it. Yeah. So we could, it was submission 799. We can deal with that perhaps offline.
What page number is that?
I don't have the page number in front of me. So if I can now call Mary Dillon to the to come and speak. Come forward, Mary. Thank you. Turn the microphone on. Yeah, thank
I think there's a bit of confusion because you've got two lots of submission. I've just seen that happen where Rob is concerned, and that's exactly what I raised with you before I started talking. There isn't a lot of point from a sustainability perspective in submitting to you today and coming back in and submitting to you on Monday. So if Mr. Peterson, for instance, wanted to put in his fourth submission today, that to me seems to be a practical approach. So
I
I'm
think,
quite,
thank you. We'll
quite happy to give way to him to finish
No,
that if you'd like.
we'll allow the submission to stand because we did hear it, and I did call it. So
I
I've
think
called all
Mr.
three
Peterson's
submissions, yeah.
telling you he's got a second submission from your second round that you haven't heard.
Okay, yeah, I've got the schedule in front of me.
Right.
So yeah, no,
So,
we've
yeah,
dealt with that.
be
But no,
that-
over to you, Mary.
Be that as it may, the muddle up that I've got is apparently my fault, and like some people, I will accept full responsibility for that. But you're going to get my two submissions end on end, if that's okay. So a brief couple of things from EnviroHub, because our original intention, just to get it clear for you, is in our first submission. I joined with EnviroHub and the Carbon Reduction Group, and we were all going to come along and talk to you together. The second round of submissions has changed that, so that's not what I'm intending to do. So there's just two comments, particularly from EnviroHub, which come off the first submission, and that is that when we're talking about infrastructure, you asked what we thought were the most important infrastructure projects and why. My view is that the most important infrastructure project we can get along with is actually intensifying Te Papa, because for a whole lot of sustainability and transport reasons. And if you're going to do that, there's something very simple you can do now. One of the issues with intensification is that people get really scared about the loss and feel of the amenity that they're going to enjoy as more and more people crowd into an area. And if you're talking about Te Papa, you might be looking at another, say, somewhere between 12 and 19,000 people over a long period of time, obviously. But one of the things you can do right now is clear your GIS maps off and look entirely at your green spaces and start working on those now. You'll be staggered at the amount of green space that you actually have on the Te Papa Peninsula that you can actually start now with community projects and what have you, turning into space that's really attractive, that meets a whole lot of sustainability, biodiversity objectives and engages communities. And if you do that, then the whole process of intensification actually changes its tune. That's not not expensive, it's easy to do, and it engages all the communities who are going to be pressured by what you're doing and who are scared because all they see is a coronation style, sort of outcome, and that's not what you're talking about at all. So that's the first thing with EnviroHub. The second thing in relation to EnviroHub is a project that we want to do as EnviroHub. We're a pretty cost-effective organisation. As you know, we run the whole of Sustainable Backyards, which is a bay-wide project, 230 projects this year, cut in half by COVID, unfortunately, but our total budget for that is about 40,000, 45,000. We do all the advertising and everything else, so we're pretty cost-effective about what we do. One of the projects that we would like to start in Tauranga, we've been doing one in Western Bay, is to actually start a streets program. That's gathering together a whole lot of the people that are in a short or small part of a street and getting them to work on all the sustainability projects, like meeting each other, the social side, meeting each other in terms of neighbourliness, working on how they might grow things better together, understanding issues to do with transport, understanding issues to do with family issues and how their families can support each other. And it's actually quite important to focus that where there's some good reserve land that they may be able to engage in as well. We have one of those projects going in Western Bay in Te Puke. It's been extremely successful. That whole neighbourhood now knows each other. They've been able to do energy efficiency things. They started planting for themselves to grow their food. They all know each other. They know where to get assistance if they need it. And they have turned around to us and said, there's a reserve in our area which is not being particularly, it just exists. We would like to be directly engaged in actually helping to design and plant that root up. That's a really good community place building thing. You can do that for a cost of between $5,000 and $10,000. And we would like the Tauranga City Council, who do not contribute to our organisation at all, in sharp contrast to the Western Bay and the regional Bay of Plenty Regional Council, to actually make that investment in us. We will set the project up, possibly in Welcome Bay, where we would work with the Welcome Bay Community Centre. So those are the two things for EnviroHub. The third thing I want to talk about is the Sustainable Business Network, and making sure that in the budget this year you actually keep the funding for the Sustainable Business Network in the budget. I don't know how much that is. I think you've given them a modest sum. It's probably in the region of 35, 40,000 a year, whatever it is. It's really important that that organisation keeps going. Again, it's a low-cost organisation. When business basically wasn't even thinking about sustainability, they were. They're strong supporters of all sustainable things. They're really, really keen and big supporters of rationalised transport networks that actually reduce carbon. But the most important thing is the whole of the circular economy and the reduction of waste in that process, and therefore less use of resources, which leaves more resources for future generations. So I strongly support keeping that money in the budget. I'm not sure whether there was any intention to remove it, but I just note it particularly. Now, if I'm on to my second submission, which you now all have a copy of, can I go down to, in the first instance, our place? And my view on our place is that you're looking at it from an entirely wrong perspective, and that is you're only looking at it from a cost perspective. Just in the last few weeks, I've been involved in a lot of hearings in relation to other matters that are not directly to do with the council, but they're still hearings that are to do with the DLC. And the overall consensus about the Tauranga CBD is that if you're looking at it on a rating of 0 to 10, it doesn't even pass. It gets to 4. That's the consensus of how people view the CBD. That is a tragedy, an absolute tragedy. And my view is that if you're looking at our place, I've got lots of granddaughters, 5 of them or 6 of them, I've lost count, but they're aged between 19 and 25. All of them love our place. They visit it. If they didn't come to our place in town, they would not be in Tauranga City at all. They would be over at the Mount. They really like the feel of that place, and I think you have misinterpreted what the money you're putting into it. You look at it from a financial point of view, it is an investment in the CBD for our young people until the CBD gets its legs again. It's a place in transition. And I really think you need to think that through. What you are doing is not okay as far as I'm concerned. I strongly disagree with it. You should leave that money there. You need to rethink or get a different lens to look at what you're actually trying to do there. And you can do some variations on it, but you should not close it. That's a big mistake. So I'll make that comment to you. The next thing I want to talk to you is obviously about the sustainability framework. At last, we are making some progress. I think I absolutely enthusiastically support doing that, getting that framework, putting the money in the budget, getting that framework up and running, and engaging the community on the ground floor from day one so that they're an integrated part of that outturn, and that this council is involved all the way through so that when it's done, the thinking behind it is actually embedded in this organisation, and I think that's really, really important. And maybe one way of assisting with that is for the Tauranga City Council to look at its current procurement policy honestly, have a read of it, and then get hold of the Christchurch's sustainability, Christchurch's procurement policy, and read that from a sustainability perspective. And I think you might get the message that there are things you can do in here right now which will assist, and you can align them with your sustainability framework as it goes through. But if you want something to start on now, have a look at that policy and have a look at Christchurch's and the way it links it in to all its strategies and policies right across the organisation. We actually managed to link ours to sustainable steps. Now, how many of you know what sustainable steps are? Good. Well, there you are, see? Makes the point. And yet on our policy, it says it links to that. So I strongly support that the sustainability project. The next thing is the Memorial Park Walkway. Can we please get that project done? It's now been on the books since 2006. The Memorial Park Walkway went into our walking and cycling strategy in 2002. It's now 2020 and we still haven't made any progress, in sharp contrast to places like New Plymouth, where you can see the walkway there. That's an 800-metre walkway from Memorial Park, our premier playground, into the city. But it's not just a recreational walkway. If you build that walkway as a walkway cycleway, hundreds of people going from 15th Avenue back probably out to the city, old city boundary at 17th Avenue, will walk into the city every day, just as they do along Oriental Parade. Because if there's one thing about Kiwis, they adore being near the waterfront. So build that walkway. You don't have to worry about the Southern Pipeline, which was the original thing that sort of started it off. That was going to run along the foreshore. Fortunately, the technology improved and you've been able to thrust that under the harbour. That technology was not available in 2006. It is now. It has been done. So all you're talking about is a walkway. And I heard a comment in this council the other day, not here today, but I heard a comment in this council the other day about somebody talked about people's rights, riparian rights, more correctly known on coasts as littoral rights. Those riparian rights are something that you actually need to look at and actually work out what they mean, if they even exist. And I think that if you go back and look at the decision, you've got to remember there's already been a resource consent granted for that walkway. It was appealed. The Tauranga City Council did not pursue that appeal. There was a change of council in 2007. I'm sure Councillor Morris remembers. And the appeal was, the thing was withdrawn because that then council didn't support it. But the resource consent was granted, the riparian rights are addressed in that resource consent, and those riparian rights, or littoral rights, also existed, obviously, along the Waikerio Expressway which is built, which is now Takatimi Drive. Quite obviously, the council dealt with those successfully. So I think it's time we got better spines, didn't worry too much about one or two affluent people who come and beat your brow, and actually got that walkway done for the good of this community. If there's anything that will assist the CBD and brighten it up and get people into the CBD, particularly in the weekends and what have you, but are able to get there sustainably during the week as a transport route, but in the weekends as a recreational route, then it's the Memorial Park Walkway. It's 800 metres. For heaven's sake, do it. So, and in terms of cost, I heard somebody talking about the cost.
Mary, apologies to break in, Mary. Apologies. I'm working off the schedule provided to me this morning.
Yep.
And we have to move to our next submitter. My apologies.
Okay. Well,
now,
I'll just.
Yeah, I appreciate that's different to the the understanding that's been conveyed to Mr. Peterson and yourself, and I
Right.
do apologise for that.
Okay, I'll accept
But
that. So
yeah,
I'll
but I
just
do
finish.
have
I'll
to
just
move
finish
on.
the comment that I was actually making. To get that walkway done, I do notice that in the budget for the Wairara Reserve, which I presume is the Esplanade Reserve, you're quite happy to spend $1.5 million in an access way to get a few people from the end of the road into that Esplanade Reserve. If you're happy to spend $1.5 million, and that's in your infrastructure budget for this year, then maybe you need to rethink about moaning about the costs for Memorial Park Walkway, which will probably be around about $7 million or so, which is the same as you're going to spend on Totara Street.
Thank you. Thank you for the submission and speaking to both and being flexible. Much appreciated. Our next submitter, colleagues, is Nathan York on behalf of Blue Haven Holdings Limited, one of our developers out in Papamoa. Tēnā koe toku whanaunga ki Raukawa. Kei te pēhea koe?
Pai ana.
Oh, good. Awesome. Over to you. Thank you, Nathan. You've got 10 minutes, but if you do finish a little earlier, my colleagues may have some questions.
Sure thing. Kia ora koutou. Good morning, everyone. As Steve mentioned, I'm the CEO of Blue Haven Group. I know most of you, but for those that I don't, Blue Haven is one of the larger developers in Tauranga. We've been in operation for over 27 years. Some of the more salient points or relevant points today, we've been an early adopter of large-scale, medium-density land and housing product, and now we're getting up to 25 units a hectare. As a result, we provide a significant proportion of affordable housing product into the community with this medium-density product, which travels around about 550k a unit, and also our leasehold lifestyle villages, which we are getting away now for 250k per unit. You may be aware, but we've also recently achieved our town centre consent in Wairakei, known as the Sands. This will be a major economic and employment generator for Tauranga in the future. Rather than go through my submission points, I'm just going to cover off 5 key points. No doubt you've got a bit of hearing fatigue. This is more forward-looking than backward-looking, and so we're not going to dwell on the past, we're just going to look forward to the things that we can change. So the first two are reasonably easy, I assume. Stage development. Your policy wording for 2.3.1 and 2.3.2 need to reflect that large-scale non-residential development does occur in stages. It's pretty simple. You don't do it holus bolus in one go, you do it in stages. So your policy needs to reflect that. The second point is that some of your maps and structure plans for Wairakei need to be updated. I've been in dialogue with council staff, and I understand our submission points in this regard can be addressed when the relevant information is at hand. The third point, which is quite a big one, is the lack of modelling and financial detail. It's really been hard for us to decipher the significant cost implications as outlined in the DC policy, and probably the bunion that sits on it really is the wastewater costs. It's gone from 32 mil to 137 mil. It's a big number. And I suppose for us, we're just trying to understand the detail and has it been fairly allocated. On a similar vein, we want to, however, see the continuation of investment in infrastructure out east. Our main focus is on roading. There are a variety of roads that have been committed to. Tuakoro Drive, the Boulevard, Emerald Shores, the Sands Avenue, and in particular the Papamoa East interchange. That is a vital piece of kit that we need out east. I want to just demystify one of the issues, is that the PEI is justified by the existing residential to develop and the town centre itself. It doesn't need to be tagged to Tutumu in the growth catchment area. On its own, the PEI, we need it now for Wairakei, and the town centre needs that PEI. It doesn't need to be tagged to Tutumu. The other areas of investment, we want to continue to see the planned growth in social and community infrastructure like pools and libraries. And Mayor, it was lovely to hear your commentary about the pools. we can deliver you a flagship regional, if not national pool, 50 metres out east. We can do that, but we have to be innovative. So rather than the build-to-own model that council's typically undertaken in the past, why not lease to buy or lease from on a long-term basis where you have the tenure, the guaranteed tenure. What it does mean is that you're not up for the 75 million or 100 million to develop those type of facilities, you're up for an annual cost. And if you can sheet that annual cost back through DCs, which was one of our key points, then you somewhat mitigate the operating costs from council. So you get that social infrastructure without writing out the big cheque. So we see that as a vital platform to work with council to deliver some of this needed infrastructure. It goes without saying, I think no one debates, we need more pools. Keep making the tough calls. I totally disagree. Our place has done its dash with the previous speaker. You made a good decision, good money after bad otherwise. Sustainability is also about financial sustainability. It's not just about the environmental sustainability, it's financial sustainability too. So if you have to sell surplus land, sell it. You're going to have to make some tough calls. One of the last points for me, and I'm happy to take any questions, is, and it's also in our submission, is tolling. We have toll roads on Takitumi Drive and Tauranga Eastern Link. We think it needs to be equitable across all major state highways to fund all the roading infrastructure. So clearly we've got an issue with Hewlett's Road. But so if we have a generic tolling regime across the city, then I think that will provide the necessary, or assist in the necessary pool of funds to help deliver this much needed roading infrastructure. Just not limited to those sort of key corridors. I know I'm on a short leash, so I will close by saying a city is the sum of the parts. Do not forget our east, where the growth has been and will continue to be in the immediate future. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Nathan. One question from Councillor Baldock, so we have time for our apologise.
Thank you, Nathan. You've got our attention, I think, on the pool. In that regard also, with the same spirit, we had a submission from some residents, community groups out there wanting to look for a community centre out east. Can we talk about that similar arrangement whereby you could look at providing that in the town centre?
Absolutely, councillor. Not only don't limit it to community centres. We've talked about libraries. We've talked about PT hubs. We've talked about a variety of things. We're up for it. And you know what the beauty is? We have the land. We now have the consent, and we have the wherewithal. We just need to work together to deliver.
I've bumped Councillor Hughes, so I'll go to Councillor Hughes and then the Mayor, if you're right, Councillor Hughes. Yeah. Fine.
Also, I'm just wondering, so you've got the space and earmarked for these kind of facilities?
Absolutely.
Yep. Our place hosted 20 local bands on the weekend free of charge. Is there any places that you could do that in your subdivision?
As long as the music's good.
Music's great. Our place have a very special place for our youth, and I think they're one group that is incredibly underrepresented in all of the submissions here. I haven't heard any youth voices, so it'd be great to have youth speak for places like that.
Cool.
Constraining to questions, Mayor Powell.
Nathan, thank you for coming in and really appreciate the effort, the thought you've gone. This is not a question, I'm sorry, but we have tagged, more to the point, we have ensured that government are aware that the PEI does not rely on Te Tumu. It's just going to make it manifestly more important, but it is a part of what's needed right now. So thank you for that. It's really good to have it reinforced.
Cool.
Thank you, colleagues. We will now break for 5 minutes only because we are a few minutes behind time now, so we will break for 5 minutes. And if I can have you back in the chamber at 11:15 sharp, please.
Yeah, you too. How are you? Yeah, good. How are you? Good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good.
think of them, we think of the communities and how the two interact and work together to create places where people can belong and thrive. That's what drives the work that our staff do every day. In terms of your annual plan, I take the submission as read, and I suppose we support your focus on helping ratepayers in these uncertain times. We will face a number of challenges in our communities as we recover from COVID-19. The vulnerable communities are going to grow, and the need's going to continue and get greater. We see the housing waiting lists continue to grow unabated. We see the need every day as we take on new tenants and work alongside other social agencies in the city to respond to their social and economic needs. I suppose just in summary, just in the interest of time, I think your clock stopped again. The projects that we're supporting are,
I've got it here.
Oh, excellent.
You've got another 5. You're all right.
It's just when that red thing comes up at the end I'm just worried about. The Anzac Park improvements and other community facilities across the city, they support safe, healthy, inclusive communities. We're really supportive of those. It's critical to building community and showing, I suppose, the tangible commitment of the city to those communities. The Cameron Road transport accessibility improvements, and we'd like to see the central corridor to Papa spatial planning and the housing choice plan change given the highest priority for implementation. And that's because of the focus on encouraging development and community regeneration within the city's footprint. The two key areas I'd just like to touch on, if I can, one is around the city's housing need and the urgency of that, and the other is our desire to partner for action with the city. So the housing need in Tauranga is an urgent issue, and you know this, but it needs leadership and action. Social and affordable housing provision in Tauranga is not keeping pace with the need. The shortfall in the provision of the city is only going to get worse as a result of COVID-19. The current situation is reflected in the city having one of the highest social housing wait lists per capita in the country. It's an undesirable gap that's only increasing and will only get worse if there's no action taken. We're supportive of the mayoral task force on homelessness and the action plan, but in our view it needs to work. The work needs to go much wider than that. For a community to function, it needs housing across the spectrum, and that's that little diagram we handed out just for you to have a look at. And I suppose it shows what something like the Pukahina project could deliver and provide. We support a progressive housing approach covering social, affordable and market housing choices. The research shows all of the pluses that can be taken from getting a mixed tenure or taking a mixed tenure approach. I think it was in 2019 there was an Infometric report highlighted how housing well-being was an urgent issue for Tauranga, with house prices growing at nearly double the rate of incomes, as reported in that report. In Tauranga City holds second place, and I think it has since 2006, for the city that has highest rental costs relative to incomes. That's not something to be proud of. This will mean that there will be significant numbers of Tauranga families in housing stress who are vulnerable to any downturn. At the end of August, we're expecting to have a piece of research that we've commissioned come out on Tauranga and its housing need, and we're expecting it to be a pretty dire reading. We're at the coalface and the impact of these trends. As a community housing provider, we can work in partnership with council and government to help build and help the city deliver. But we need the opportunities to do that, to work on common priorities together. Tauranga City Council's own valuable elder housing and how you choose to use this will be a decision that impacts future generations. You'll see from our submission and the summary attached to it that we've engaged with the Gate Power and Tauranga South tenants. This is the way that we work. It's part of our work on the Pukahina project. We're strongly of the view that the work we do with communities needs to be designed from the ground up. We need to work with these communities, not to them. That takes a lot of understanding, research, deep commitment to ongoing engagement and partnership. So we need to partner for action to deliver housing and the community regeneration differently. We see potential for constructive engagement with the council, central government, on how to use COVID-19 responses and recovery strategies to strengthen community cohesion. This could deliver real economic and social gains for the city and its residents. The Pukahina project is gaining wide support across the community, and it's in our submission on the engagement of feedback to date. The project aligns with the Tauranga urban strategy. It's an integral part of the work that's now underway with the Tauranga City Council and your Te Papa Peninsula planning processes. We congratulate your team, your Te Papa team, on the way they've engaged with us on that work to date, and we support it progressing as quickly as possible
The Pukehenehena project would be a positive way to show the housing choice plan change in action. Tauranga needs an inner city action project pilot of some scale to show what's possible in terms of quality design and master planning, and waiting for years for that to happen can't be an option. The housing stock in that area is continuing to deteriorate, and it'll soon be at the end of its useful life. We have a vision for a community-led, co-designed, comprehensive community renewal project in partnership with others, including Smart Growth, the City Council and government agencies, and the District Health Board. It would create a lot of jobs and many new homes. The project would be complex, but it could realise a range of health, housing and community outcomes if delivered in a multi-partner plan, including mixed tenure, mixed typology approach across social, affordable and market housing choices. The project can't be delivered in the current district plan rules. It involves substantial public sector land holdings, education, health and council, roads, parks, reserves. It has to be in partnership with us to succeed and deliver for the people in the city. And I suppose therein lies the challenge and also a really amazing opportunity of how can we make real progress on projects that will make a real difference. And as your own recovery plan points out, deliver things differently, not just plan them, but actually deliver them. Accessible Properties knows it's not an easy task, balancing all the trade-offs in the current environment and within the financial and debt management constraints that you have, but we have to start now. It's time to act. We'd like to work with you collaboratively to make a difference and be part of a challenging and uniting recovery through specific housing and community development projects. This would support and help ensure that your residents, including our tenants...
Sorry, Larry. Just another 30 seconds.
That's right. Sorry, that's right. So in the end, I can finish off. They'll support and ensure that our residents, including our tenants, can live and thrive and build strong sense of community in Tauranga.
I've had 4 people signal for a question, but I'll only be able to take one. Councillor Baldock, you got in first.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'll be very quick. Thanks for that. You own property on the corner of 21st Ave, and we've been made aware by a submission about the health board's plans for their mental health. Have you made presentations about working together with them on delivering more than single-storey accommodation on that site?
We've talked with the health board more generally, but we've certainly got, and we've talked with your staff around plans and opportunities for that site that are far greater than single story.
Thank you for that, and thank you. I called you Larry by accident. That's
all
rude,
right.
but it's all right. It's a compliment. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Vicky, for the submission on behalf of Accessible
And happy
Properties.
to take any emails if anyone's got any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for what you're doing in our city. Our next submitter, colleagues, is Ian Stevenson. Personal submission first up. So we've got 3 submissions that Mr. Stevenson is scheduled to speak to. The first one, a personal one. The second one, Stevenson Accounting Limited, and the third one, Body Zone 2016 Limited. What we'll do is we'll take each, because they're each 3 different legal entities, we'll take each submission separately. So if we could have the first submission, Mr. Stevenson, your personal one.
Chairman, could I just ask that they be able to see their countdown properly on the screen? Because then it's not...
Yeah, no, we've got that.
Well, it wasn't for the last one.
Yeah, no, we've got it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go for it. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. So yeah, the first submission has 10 minutes allocated. If you finish a little earlier, then there may be some opportunity for some questions.
We shall see. I've handed out 2 items. One's attachments, one is what I intend to present, and I'm just getting organised. So I'm not sure if I've presented them in the same order as you have them listed, but regardless, I'll do one at a time. So to start with, it's good to be here. I've prepared 3 presentations, and the first from myself, and the subject is Bay Venues. Historically, one of the aims of merging the various entities together, as previously recommended, was to save costs to ratepayers from the restructure of the components of what is now a large and unresponsive behemoth of an organisation. Far from saving monies for TCC ratepayers, the opposite would appear to have happened. These points are relevant. The annual budget is approved as part of the annual plan process, but these do not, or this does not include the depreciation provision, the loss, for example, of 4.1 million in a given year, and as a note, only the 19-year budget showed a 2.7 million deficit. The only time BVL can manage a surplus is when the directors create a revaluation of the assets on its books, which of course is a paper entry, not a cash item. So inevitably there's more cash going into BVL than you are approving. And this is reflected in the annual accounts that are audited of council and BVL. So attachment A, you'll note the orange circle shows the 16 and the 15 year and the increase in the loan from 7.5 million to 9.3 million. And over the page, you'll notice the 17 and 18 year 11.2 million to 13.1 million. And on item C, it increases from 13.1 to 14.7 million. That's got to be money above and beyond what's approved in the budget. It's cash or goods, and I don't know where it's approved. So that's cash going out of the bank that then adds to the shortage of cash in the bank that then is borrowed to keep solvent for council. I don't think it's acceptable that the budget is inadequate. It's reflected in BVL's balance sheet because the budget always seems to be considerably understated on what is actually spent. And that's the gap we're talking about, is what's actually been spent versus what's approved and what's budgeted for. So I think you need to have a good hard look at that, because you're approving a lovely budget, but that's not what actually seems to be happening according to what the cash flow shows. And the balance sheet on both is audited, so I don't think we can dispute that. One can only presume that the budgeted sum is put across, not arguing with that. What's a clear pattern, and has been for Bay Venues and its predecessors, is that there is extra cash goes across. I've asked, and I have got no answer of where that is approved. There is an answer potentially of a lame justification for it, which is attachment D, and there are 2 pages to that. One is a letter dated 10th August 11 to Mr. Graham Elvin, who at that time I believe was a director of Tauranga City Venues Limited, and the request was for a letter of comfort. In other words, council was on an unlimited basis underwriting BVL's solvency, or more to the point, insolvency. That letter was drafted somewhat differently, 22nd August 14, and the letter speaks for itself. It's covering the obligations on point 1 of TCAL, TCVL and BVL as they moved together and amalgamated year by year. A wondrous merger has failed to deliver. The solutions, this is on page 2 of my presentation. Item 1, I believe that there's a duplication of management on council side and BVL, and a significant saving could be made by eliminating that duplication of structure. Second, any non-core activity must be self-funding on a full cost basis. The appointment of directors, private sector or whatever, have not resulted in a better outcome. There were some private sector based directors early on. They seem to have left. The financial side continues. Number 3, the duplication of facilities provides no meaningful benefit to TCC ratepayers, only more costs and losses. For the plans for Memorial Park, the cost has blown out. Before even starting, it was around 45 million. In March, it appeared to get to 75, and then a week or two later, somehow it got to 100 million. I don't know when that was publicly consulted at any stage. News to me. Who knows what the plan is, what the business plan, the budget, nothing. It is not infrastructure, so I don't know quite how it can be tabled to government as a shovel-ready-to-go project. It simply looks to be a replication of what's at Bay Park, Bay Arena and some. I can't see how on point 4 that the BVL losses will likely double or more. And the losses as reported are not the whole picture. We'll come to that. Any revenue projections will be grossly exaggerated, with only likely outcome being the existing BVL income will only increase by a minimal amount, whereas costs will rise exponentially. Last point, will at a minimum double the cost to TC ratepayers via BVL, likely to be somewhere around 20 to 25 million per annum. So just harking back to the loan, I won't read it all. I've simply itemised what the loans are and what the increases are annually. Prior to 15, there was 1 year where the ASB Arena was switched in there. Significant shares were issued, around 49 million, the cash transferred over. Basically, the debt and losses of BVL was shifted back to council. That then reduced, obviously, the funding or debt provision budget that's provided as well. But it's, in essence, the true cost of BVL is not recorded in BVL. At the bottom of the page, effectively, according to the books, council ratepayers have sunk 100 million plus into BVL and its predecessors. In addition, an estimated additional sums for annual losses of 2+ million a year, annual plan allocation of 8 or 9 million a year, depreciation reserves are meant to be added to rates, some 6 million, that is in the current year, 19 year, and interest and debt repayments shifted out of BVL. De-verification exists, and I'm referring to the letters of insolvency generally. The debt's shifted out. I would estimate around 20 million a year annual cost added to rates for what BVL does. And it's failed in its budget. That is nowhere near what the budget is initially, which was the purpose of merging BVL. For your reading, it applies perhaps to BVL and Tauranga Council itself. To be insolvent means one of two things, or perhaps both. Debt cannot be paid when they are due. This is confirmed annually by the increase in loan from TCC to BVL. This is unapproved, unauthorised loan above the annual budget that councillors approve. This is an every year event. Second, total debt is more than the value of all assets. BVL regularly create a new and higher annual value in its books for the assets recorded. These magical numbers are not market value at all. They are instead an estimated replacement cost, a DVR basis usually, which is often considered considerably more than market value. I haven't put a reference.
Apologies, Mr. Stevenson. The time for the submission, the personal submission, has elapsed. If we could move to Body Zone 2016 Limited.
Can do. I just want to give the reference of what that's for, which is, if you could revert to attachment Z, the second page, third page of that. Okay, I was almost finished. All right, the second one, page 4. Moving on to other subjects. Our place. You've asked for a response on that as to whether it should be funded So in my view, not. Tourism BOP and the airport, I believe there's funding being linked between those two. Right now, there's no tourists, no cruise ships, and not likely in the next 2 or 3 years at best. It's a leech-like appendage that's simply sucking money out of council and is generating nothing. The likelihood of change, unlikely. Tourism, border shut, fait accompli. Rate increases, I'd refer you to attachment L. In March 06, former Mayor Crosby issued a letter to all ratepayers detailing a massive rate rise, which as noted was 14.6% intended for the June 7 year. I refer you to attachment M, which highlights the increase in debt between 01 and 16, 55 million to 457 million, a meteoric rise indeed. It also noted the increase in interest costs, risk to cash flow, and where it was going, worse. It's historic, I appreciate. This next page, which is an article, an advert that was in the paper, noted at the time, noted a 17.8% rate increase. Now this was about September 13, and this was also meant to be a cure-all for council's financial woes at that time, as previous. And this March, we had the same scenario where a massive rate rise was proposed. The top end was 17.6% from memory. The council initially adopted 12.6 and it's dropped since. But the issue here is history is repeating. The cure-all of the financial problems of council is a massive hike in rates. It's obviously been tried before and it's failed, because here we are today with the same problem. Perhaps a new strategy is required. For example, look at the costs of operating council and maybe the capex, which is why you need the revenue. Attachment N, although this is somewhat historic, it's reflective of the issue. Figure 1 shows that rates between 2003 and 2010 were the highest component of CPI. Figure 2 shows you the collective council debt as it's grown from 2000 to 2015. It's a horrific increase, and it's only got worse since. Attachment O is an interesting graph whereby the red line depicts the debt increase and the blue line indicates the capex. And after about 07-08, they separate. The borrowings continued, in other words, without it being necessarily capex. Now these are New Zealand wide, but it gives you an idea of the clear trend. Figure 4 illustrates 2 time periods, 05 to 8 and 8 to 11, where councils across New Zealand are generally top of the pops when it comes to pay rates. 08 to 11 is obviously the GFC period. The private sector and government reined in the cost, councils didn't, and that links in with the CPI component. Attachment P is a recent report independently carried out of councils. I've highlighted the 2 damning parts of it. And reading the first, the killer conclusion, was evidence drawn from 2 independent surveys. This one included showing the council pay rates are on average 37.7% above comparable private sector pay rates. When it's claimed that they're meant to be pay parity or keep up with, that's quite clearly not the case. The second part, yeah, same problem. Attachment Q is a TCC staff prepared report gathering data from the 13 census. It quite clearly shows that Tauranga is not the highest growth city in New Zealand. I mean, it's just black and white. It's perhaps at the upper end of average, but it's not exceptional. Nearing the end, I hope. A heading, Economic Recession is Coming to New Zealand. Attachment R is a Bank of England report, a graph showing the last 300 years of GDP change. The prediction is this year will be the worst in 300 years. That exceeds the Depression, the GFC, Spanish flu, and amongst many others. The graph is quite startling in what's predicted. And the line at the top, more likely to have been underestimated the scale of the economic crash. So they're talking for this year. S is a similar graph picking out the highlights. You can see since 1706, any recession has not been as bad as what's predicted for this year. Item T is a Herald article recently noting what's coming in New Zealand as reported. I've highlighted some interesting parts in yellow. For example, the bottom part, construction, is probably the beginning of those recessionary dynamics. This is a very volatile component of the gross domestic product. Business investment broadly generally contracts a lot more than other components of GDP. Building industry will likely 6-9 months show some signs of drop. Existing projects will complete. It's what happens next that really matters. A big piece of council's income is the SIFs and BIFs, development levies and so on. So I think there's going to be some problems there. Back to the page 5, the COVID-19 subsidy. I think council's got some problems in justifying having claimed it itself, and that's referring to the fact that the majority of council income is unchanged. I'm sure that'll wash out. I don't have such an issue perhaps with tourism BOP and art gallery and so on, but there are questions there too. It seems odd that it's been applied for. I believe only 3 councils have. It's odd. Elizabeth Street, like Devonport and Durham, and each street is going to be underwhelming. I believe it's not worth spending that money, especially now, current times. TCC is insolvent. I believe that's been stated. The Mayor isn't here at the moment. I think that was his reported words. I don't disagree. The Council has reached an intolerable level of rates, and it has reached a ceiling with debt. The hard decisions are going to have to be made now or very, very soon. Bus lane, Cameron Road, these ideas are less than helpful to traffic flow and so on, costly and obstructive to commercial and private users by way of creating congestion. Part of the reason appears to be to encourage the use of public transport, bicycles, etc. However, by doing so simply slows down traffic flows so as vehicles remain on the roads longer, so increasing congestion further. If there is a green agenda as part of all this, then obviously the outcome is counterproductive. In addition to no longer time and life wasted, the emissions will be higher, not lower. Obviously, because the cars on the road idling is not a good outcome either, is it? The rubbish collection, I understand that's been deferred for a year, but I can't see any benefit to ratepayers out of it. Right now, ratepayers are paying for what they want, and there's not a council bureaucracy loading. I believe in the 90s, rubbish collection was offloaded out of Tauranga Council. Why would you bring it back in? If it's anything like the glass collection, you're probably going to be looking...
Apologies, Mr. Stevenson.
Again?
The
I'm almost
time
finished.
for the second submission has elapsed. If we could move to the submission
Okay.
from Stevenson Accounting Limited.
You may read the rest.
Thank you.
All right, page 7. Depreciation reserves. I refer you to attachment F. This is an extract from virtually the back end of the annual accounts, and it represents a by department summary of the reserves collected. As I understand it, the depreciation is levied into rates and collected in cash, and a reserve is recorded, which totals 132 million as at 30th of June 19. The question is, where's that cash? It's obviously not in the balance sheet. If you go to attachment G, highlighted in orange, you can see that the cash is definitely not in the bank. So where is it? It's cash collected for a specific purpose, which is capex, asset replacement, so on. The simplistic answer is that the cash has been used to reduce debt. If that's the case, then obviously it's economically a sensible thing to do, but it understates the debt because there's a clear obligation with that money collected of what it's for, and at some point it will have to be spent on that. So such things as the debt ratio, the debt used, the numbers to calculate are then significantly understated. In 2013, Standard & Poor's did a review, and attachment I shows you their calculation of the council debt ratio. And at that time, for example, 2011, it exceeded 250%. And in the years following, it did not alter significantly. Admittedly, the last few years are based on budget, which is usually somewhat more optimistic than actual. Refer you on to attachment J. This is an article at the time which made some comments out of that Standard & Poor's report, and the bottom of page 2 of it, highlighted in yellow, notes generally what the adjustments were that were made by Standard & Poor's as compared to what council reported. In essence, at that time, the ratio was understated by some 30%. Attachment K is where I have extracted on page 1 the detail out of the council annual accounts for the 18 and 19 year, the particulars of what makes up the total income stated. The bottom of the page you can see 315.5 million for 18 and 343.68 million for 19. That sounds good. When you go over the page, I've broken that down into what is actually council revenue, and that's the top part, 210 million and then 224 million. What is capital cost recoveries contributions, for example, where NZTA contribute towards road works or whatever, development contributions, which are a capex recovery, they're not income. And last but not least is various vested assets, which are not a cash item, they're not a revenue item, and capital gains and revaluations. So what we have here, based on a simplistic revenue to debt calculation, if I take the accounts-based income, we have the upper percentages shown of, the lower percentage shown of 156% and 171. But in reality, when you actually take that income and that debt, the interest-bearing debt, it's considerably different. In my view, it's been significantly understated. And it's been done by shifting items in the profit and loss account up to the top and calling them revenue. What I actually found was incredible was that the Bella Vista insurance claim, about 3/4 of the way down on the first page, 9.174 million in the 19 year, is shown as revenue, when clearly that's a contribution towards the cost of those houses. It's bewildering. I know why. You want the income higher so you can keep the debt limit higher still. That's what it's about. Over the page, 8, debt repayment plan. Where is it? If you're going to borrow money, it's prudent to have a plan to pay it back. That's all I'll say on that. Regulatory compliance, attachment X. It's an extract from the MB report on Bella Vista. Note 2 highlighted. MB is satisfied the Council's failure in properly performing regulatory functions is self-evident from the ultimate demise of Bella Vista development and sees no reason to revisit Honourable Paul Heath QC's findings. That, in conjunction with the Colgan executive summary, which stated that some staff had been negligent and some staff had exceeded statutory duty, I believe, would lead one to the ominous question of which council staff members are that, and can you believe what they say when they present to you? The Act says that you should be able to accept a consultant or staff member's reasonable, qualified, knowledgeable report to you, but if you don't know who they are, who do you know who to trust, who to believe? How can you do your job? I have noted there the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The reason I'm saying that, and I'm relating it to Bella Vista, building services, and other issues such as bay venues and hiking rates, if you keep doing it and it doesn't work, you need to think of something new, something different to what you have been doing to get the result you want. I'll move over the page. About a third of the way down, there's multi-millions to be saved from. Stop CapEx for 12 to 24 months. Now obviously that means if a project's underway you can't really practically do that, but anything that's planned to start, perhaps you should take a little holiday from it, step back, review the project, review the costing, review the management of it. Every aspect of it should be reviewed because to date there have been a plethora of projects whereby there have been budget blowouts, complications, unforeseens. The money involved is mind-blowing. I shall just find in particular one that was reported recently, which is the sewage and water lines, which I believe had some 500% blowout in cost. It's an unbelievable number that just shouldn't be happening. Sorry, pages, oh there we go, V. I believe you've seen that from a DC report. 9 odd million blew out to 56 and 8.4 to 36 million. That's just incredible cost rises. I've got a pretty good idea why, but time does not permit that for now. C, eliminate either staff or consultants. They're a duplication. D, the middle management ranks are ballooning and have done so for well over a decade. At the time, i.e. 10 years ago, staff ratio was noted this is the manager-staff ratio, is noted as 1:4, when it should be 1:10 or more. You should review the rates of pay. The evidence is in your attachments for that. P, for example. F, eliminate BVL management. Smart growth hasn't delivered on what it was intended to. Should go. Art gallery contribution was meant to be 1 year only, and it's still annual. Why? The alleged artefact storage. If in fact there is to be a virtual museum, which I don't think is a good idea, then what do you need the actual artefacts for? Perhaps it's about time to return them. Save the cost of what's probably several staff, storage and so on.
Apologies, Mr. Stevenson. We'll have to leave it at I. The time for the submission has elapsed. Colleagues, we've now heard from all scheduled submitters. In that case, I will adjourn the meeting and we will reconvene at 9 a.m. on Monday. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you to the members of the public.